The boy was sitting on a tree and looking at the sky when someone called him. A girl appeared under the tree who looked unhappy about something. Yustafa's father was looking for him. The girl did not understand why he climbed the tree every time. The answer was simple. The young man promised that he would come down soon. The blonde didn't change her mood. The hero really didn't make any effort at all. This was already going beyond the limits. They have different blood, but the lady really tried, in fact. Even so, from the very beginning, she did not hope for a warm relationship. The girl was about to leave, but before she could, Yustaf accidentally fell, and that's how the main character's half-sister on his father's side died. In fact, the loss was not great. The girl was one of the villains of the novel written by the author. The blonde opened her eyes abruptly. She didn't believe it. It seemed that what had happened was a dream, but it was quite difficult to believe it. However, the body still cannot get used to it. A little earlier, when the lady got into the novel, her soul was transferred to the daughter of the stepmother, who caused the main character an injury. Ran Remigio de Lazia was that very daughter. She came to this house with the woman who married the duke. The girl did not have a drop of the master's blood. She was not related to him, but the duke, who was head over heels in love, happily included Ran in his family. Before the heroine got into the novel, she was an ordinary graduate student. One day she was returning home from her parents and got into an accident. No one could have imagined that, thanks to the incident, they would get into the novel that the girl herself wrote. The blonde realized her name when she woke up in a new body. At first, she thought that she could easily get out, because everything was familiar to her. The problem that arose was that the lady got into the novel at a time when there were still about 7 years before the beginning of the story. The woman did not understand how to behave. While she was thinking, there was a knock on the room, and then a scream was heard. The mother appeared on the threshold. She thought that the girl had died after what happened, and was happy that everything was okay. She needed to rest. Ran tried to explain that she was okay, but no one really listened to her. Both her mother and Tass, her younger brother, were worried about the girl. As far as I remembered, in the original, the Duchess gave birth to a boy, and after that began to make life difficult for the son of the Duke's ex-wife, Eustace. Now she was furious. She was going to teach the boy a lesson. One of the options was to hire some strict teacher. The blonde screamed again that she was okay, because she knew that the teacher would leave the boy traumatized. She had to refuse. The heroine came up with another option. The young man could be sent to the academy in the morning, so he would be a little further away and would not interfere. Mother nodded. Ran was smart. Everything should have been better this way. Yus probably wanted to get out of the house too. Although there were some disputes, in the end, the hero still left for the Imperial Academy. He simply had no other choice. The blonde thought that everything would be fine. But then, 4 years later, her parents and Tass died in a carriage accident. The worst thing is that the girl knew about it. The woman couldn't prevent anything. In the novel, the tragedy was on the ship, so the blonde thought she could play out her story. The day of the funeral arrived, and among many acquaintances, the lady noticed a man with dark hair in a dark blue academy uniform. Their gazes met by chance, and the maiden almost immediately turned away, although she understood that this was wrong. This man should be lured to the Duchess's side at any cost. The brunette approached. He noticed that his sister was not feeling well. They should go back. The lady nodded, although she noticed that the face was too cold for someone who was worried. The family of the Duke of Latium is a line with a longer history than the empire itself. Even when the continent was plunged into war, the emperor and feudal lords might be changed, but the family with the endlessly high mountain ranges in the background never ceased to nobly maintain its place. The master's castle was a work of art created by the hands of a magician. In the ice wall, the great sage Ibria left a sealed, dazzling snow-white door, cleared of darkness. Now the family is on the verge of collapse. Winter has been going on for half a year, so the land is infertile. Latium is famous not only for its castle. There is an emerald crown of life. Green was considered an expensive color. The crown, which was valuable, belonged to the owner, and, as if bringing a blessing of life energy, was originally created with the intention of increasing her favors. Even though Mother Ran was the head of the house, she hated her. She wore crowns made of rubies. It was a kind of protest. The real heir, Yustaf, is not yet an adult, but he is still very capable, because he is the main character. There was a problem. The uncle, Baron Lindbog, not only wanted to take away the entire inheritance, but also decided to force the guy to marry his daughter in order to kill him later. The maiden was thinking about how to prevent all this. Something strange was felt. Ross, the master's personal knight, stared at the lady. Yustafa definitely needed to be protected. Having found the right way, the heroine turned to her brother. He immediately responded. The green-eyed girl said that she was on the side of truth and wanted it to be known. When they walked away to the carriage, the girl said what she wanted. It seems that uncle and aunt are going to make Ran the head of the family, so she will agree. She will make it so that they cannot lay a finger on the property. Once the plan is completed, the girl plans to hand over all the property to Yustaf, as the one who is the official heir. The young man got into the carriage, and Ross immediately asked what the fox had said. Upon learning the truth, he grimaced with displeasure. Her behavior was strange. The girl returned to her place. She was going to carry out her plan. The most important thing first was to gain recognition as the head of the family. The woman arrived at the official meeting, where more than 10 people were already waiting for her at a long table. The blonde realized that it was good that she had pulled her veil down lower, so that they would not be able to see her expression. It was safer. There is a blue flame. This is the ring of the family. If someone other than the head puts it on his finger, something terrible will happen. A person who is not recognized as an official successor will burn, and the ring will only fully accept as its owner the one who knows the name of the spirit. All those gathered glorified the blue flame, a greeting that is said only to the head of the Latian clan. The woman is already halfway there. Uncle began to speak, asking to start the meeting. The reason for the meeting was generally obvious. Everyone knew what the conversation would be about. The man began to play his role, his heart breaking at the thought that his older brother's family was no longer with them. Others in the room, of course, objected. The Duke's line remains alive. Yustaf is still a minor, so the head of the family will be Ran, who is capable of this. Someone was against such a development of events. Even though the lady has the same surname, she does not have ducal blood in her. She cannot become the head. You can forget about it. The blonde decided to intervene. She knows perfectly well that there are also those in the room who are against her becoming the head. They have their own reasons. Yus is still a minor. It's true, he needs help to wait until the moment when he can take his rightful place. The beauty smiled as she looked at her brother. As long as he grows up, she will always be on his side and try to help. The woman presented her point of view to those gathered. She was going to be the head for only 2 years. These were temporary measures. When the lady sat down at the table, whispers were heard. They can be understood. But if the problem is in the blood, the girl asked the guy to give her the ring. Yustaf hesitated at first, but then he held out the ring that was hanging on a chain. No one had ever told the woman a name, but she didn't need it. She wrote a novel and knows everything. A blue light flashed around, and immediately everyone around reacted. Perhaps too sharply. Everything was spinning so much that it was getting bad. But the girl didn't lose her head and ordered Istalif to stop. A second later, everything stopped. It became easier. But the people around were even more surprised. No one believed that she put on the ring, not being a blood relative. All this meant was that the blue flame had chosen the lady as the mistress of the family, and now she had the right to become the head at the official level. The woman was truly happy that she would now become the head, albeit for a short time. She was going to hand over the reins of power to Yustaf as soon as the time came. There was no need to address by status, and there was no point in greeting the blue flame. The lady was not going to stay long anyway. There are 3 families that revere the Duke of Latium. The Wild, Lance, and Illuminate are important, but even they cannot fully swear their allegiance. Wild, as the lady has long noted, is probably on Yustaf's side. Baron Lance is incredibly honest, so he will not betray. But there will still be a third count, the main problem. The meeting was finally over. Everyone had left, and it seemed as if everything was calm. At least relatively, only Yus remained. The man asked his sister how she managed to make the blue flame appear and obey. The girl shrugged, saying that she was just lucky. The blonde knew that she would make her family happy. She still had tasks that were not completed. For example, she needed to find the second main male character. I had to start by paying off my debts. Everything had to be done with the help of the ice wall mine. Inside it, there is a huge amount of mana. In the original work, the heroine learned about it much later. The girl also did not remember where exactly it was located, although she wrote about it herself. Yus distracted Ran from his thoughts. He was going to go back to the academy. He still had graduation ahead of him that he couldn't miss. Since the girl took on the temporary role of the leader, the young man could not miss the rest. Before leaving, he repeated the phrase again. Hail to the blue flame. The maiden couldn't stand it and started screaming. The ring still belonged to Ladium. He shouldn't behave like that, paying homage. The blonde reminded them that they were a family, and it was time to move on to informal communication. But then she felt as if she had been struck. The man had never considered Ran a close person. As soon as the door closed, she fell face down on the table. All this was losing its meaning. At this rate, if nothing changed, the girl risked being kicked out. It was decided to put aside money little by little, just in case, and it was also decided that Lord Ross would remain in Ladium and become the family's temporary guard. The girl went out to see the young man off. She still didn't fully understand how to behave with him, but she sincerely believed in the best outcome. Ran talked to her brother until he followed her into the carriage, and it seemed that this was where he put a bold end to the conversation. Moving on, the lady turned to Lord Ross. He looked skeptically. Nothing new was found in such a look. While Yustaf was at the academy, the young man was supposed to help with all the affairs in the duchy. The woman reminded him of this again. It was time to start active work. Initially, the lady was determined, hoping that the outcome would be nothing short of successful. After some time, everything changed. The situation turned out to be worse than expected. The land was leased to usurers. This brought problems. Although the Duke's residence was large, there was a lot of useless land on the territory. There was little fertile soil left, and it was also mortgaged. Ran realized that fixing the situation would be more difficult than she thought. Without territories, they risked dying of hunger. Something had to change. The duties were divided into 4 parts. The servants and the butler, who was also responsible for the documents, were in charge of all the affairs inside the castle. The head of the detachment remained responsible for military strength, such as soldiers and knights, while the financier was in charge of finances. Ran had to replace the person in charge of finance, because in the novel she described him as a real piece of trash. Elizabeth, the manager, was called almost immediately. She guessed why she had come to the office, but she wanted to hear everything directly. All the signatures on the contracts were fake. There were no reserves, but they wrote that there were. Income and expenses were in complete disarray. The girl first planned to fire the financier. Lord Wayne was given orders to explore the northern mountain range and to pay attention to the caves located nearby. Towards the end of the working day, the lady was completely tired. She sat down to drink tea. When Ross came to her with complaints, he heard that the head was sent for research. For some reason, the brunette thought that they were skillfully trying to get rid of the man, because they sent him somewhere to a door from which it was difficult to get out. Various monsters often appeared near that place before. They want to get rid of Mr. Yustifa's military force directly. The woman smiled. She was asked so sincerely that it made her feel even more uneasy. The answer should have been simple. Yus believes in the head of the knights, and the lady supports him. Ross was still unhappy. The head did not receive proper training. The woman didn't want her to become a manager, but it all ended that way. Yustaf won't suffer as much as in the story. While they were talking, a loud knock was heard, and the uncle ran into the room. He was clearly upset about something. Before the man got to the main topic, he expressed a desire to appoint a new guard for the lady. Her new man had no sense of loyalty. This man, of course, was stating the obvious. The girl said that Ross was quite enough for her. She would not need any more security. The brunette remained silent, and then asked if the lady knew that her mother was in debt. Earlier, she wanted to buy herself a necklace, which is why she unexpectedly borrowed a large sum. A promissory note was placed on the table first. The woman borrowed a whole 10,000, which means that every month the amount increases by 1,000. The hero suddenly began to talk about something else. Ran, after all, was his niece. He began to think about turning a blind eye to this debt. They are already blood relatives, but the man would like them to become a real family. Lazia could marry his son. Robbie's cousin has a difference of only 5 years with the heroine. The uncle did not see a problem in this. This man lives a dissolute life and probably does not think about anything. The woman would have liked to refuse, but in a soft manner, so as not to make an enemy. The blonde quietly said that it was only because of the debt that she could not get married. The family has other debts. The lady will need a smarter person who will advise something. Obviously, the man meant himself. Ross came into the lady's office. It was already night outside. Business could be continued in the morning. The lady stretched and agreed. Before this, the lady showed the young man a pipe. Every time she would talk to her uncle, everything would be heard perfectly from there. It was not difficult to understand why the lady was showing all this. She sincerely wanted to gain trust in order to be part of the family. The academy was a place created by the empire to provide high-level education, and noble families without exception sent their offspring there. There were parallels between graduates and friends made at the school. From the very beginning, Lazia was one step behind everyone. The first one to enter there, Yus, attracted attention. There are 3 ducal families in the empire, and of course the most closed is Latium. Thanks to the history of the family, the man received more than enough glances. The girl wrote letters to the guy. She wanted him to graduate quickly and come back to help, but he didn't understand whether the reason was true. Ross reported that a squad of knights had been sent to the cave, and the question immediately arose as to how the lady had learned about it and whether it would help the duchy. The financier's sentence was quickly carried out. Some were happy, some were horrified. Rand ignored everyone. The man had embezzled huge sums of money, but had spent it all on gambling, and Lord Vane arrived to report that they had discovered a cave. The brunette handed over what was originally needed to be found. On the table was a huge mana stone. It had a high level of purity. Creating magical items didn't seem like a difficult task, and creating them was even easier. The girl planned to do it. Ordinary mana stones have a rather low purity, which is why they quickly lose their properties. With the supply of such pure stones, everything will change. Rand didn't think they would be able to find everything soon enough. Blaine had worked hard, so now he deserved some time to rest. There are still many situations not described in the novel. There are 3 large trading continents on the continent. The lady decided to choose the Golden Rose. Ross asked about the stone. The lady lied that she herself was not entirely sure. They were discovered in the novels much later, so she saw no need to tell the details. One day, the real Ron went to the door and got lost. Her stepmother said that it was all planned by Yustaf, and then he was punished for the first time. Now the heroine combined those memories with information. She was just lucky. Now she had other plans. The lady made sure that she needed to write to her brother, and this should have been the end of the guy's difficulties in life, and there could have been fewer worries. It was necessary to start looking for the second main character. He was a slave, but next year he should end up in illegal fights. There are 2 years left before Yustaf becomes the head. In 6 months, he will graduate from the academy and return back to the estate. The brunette read the letter and learned that a lot of debt had also accumulated over all this time. It's good that Rand found the mana stones. They will help with the payments. The dream was realistic. The girl was almost executed, because the new head decided that after everything her life had to end right then. At the most unpleasant moment, the heroine jumped up in bed. The blonde was really experiencing a lot of stress, and all of this was poisoning her life. The Virgin remembered the day when she first realized that she had been reborn. It had surprised her greatly at the time, although later it became clear what was what. Full understanding came only after Yustaf came to ask for forgiveness. A little later, the heroine was in shock when she first met him. The completely emotionless face showed how indifferent this man really was. The thought flashed through his mind that Rand had made him like this. The author didn't think when she wrote it. Because of the story, it was hard not only for Yustaf, but also for everyone around him. Until the heroine earned his trust, the guy's life is also in danger. The blonde tried to calm herself down. She knew how to change history, and she was going to do it right. She was ready for her day, knowing she would meet the man from the Golden Rose. Among all the halls of the estate, there was an emerald room for special guests. Although they were not from a noble family, the lady believed that it was important to be there. The girl was greeted by Rabori Rabati. The heroine was a little surprised that she was visited not even by the head of the branch, but by the head. Romia, on behalf of Lazia, sent a mana stone and a letter. With such stones, changes were supposed to come to the world, and with them, huge profits. Before coming to a stranger's house, the woman, of course, found out a lot, and was happy that now she was informed. Although Latium was an ordinary closed ducal family, the girl in front of the lady who became the head did not have a drop of the duke's blood. No matter how dying the family was, considering their debts, Robori could not underestimate them. They got straight to the point. The heroine said that she wanted to sell the mana stones. Diva wanted a deposit of 1 million barat. This is the largest amount that Rabadi could put into circulation. Romia certainly knew a lot, since she asked for so much money. Usually, the Duke had imported the goods before, but the cost was much lower. After clearing her throat slightly, the lady noted that this was perhaps too much. The blonde reminded them of the terms and conditions, that it was impossible to provide a deposit without any information, and that they hadn't told her anything about the mining of stones. The crystals were extracted from the ice wall. The reaction to the words was real. After all, the treasures were found on the territory of Latium. There are principles of trust between entrepreneurs, and Romia tried to respect them. She asked again about concluding the deal. Rabati smiled. Latium wants trust, in which they will not have any disagreements. The company always has a choice. The woman pointed to the door. In case of refusal, it was better to leave immediately. Rand became the head not so long ago, but rumors were already spreading that she was not so simple. It was decided that Golden Rose should become permanent, exclusive customers for 1 year. Trust always needs to be tested. It was decided to discuss the details over dinner. A week later, Robori was resting at the ducal estate after a long journey, and, of course, decided to personally climb the mountain. The blonde was shocked when she saw everything. The deposits were really incredibly huge. The author described abundance in the novel. The heroine sincerely hoped that she would be able to start mining as soon as possible before the onset of winter, at which point the contract could be considered signed. The girl took some stones with her. She promised that the first half of the payment would be transferred very soon. The second half would be in a month. The head decided to take a rest. The assistant brought a letter that was given to her. When she was about to read it, her nose started bleeding, probably from overwork. After a while, the lady opened her eyes. She was in bed in another room and thought it was a dream. Because Yustaf was sitting next to her, he had become even taller, which meant he would grow even faster. The woman nevertheless greeted her brother, and he immediately stood up. He checked his temperature and realized that everything seemed to be fine. His body had returned to normal. The blonde nodded. She couldn't help but notice that Yus had very beautiful fingers. The brunette asked again, as if he wanted to clarify. The lady continued to speak, as if she could not shut up. Her fingers were long and straight, therefore beautiful. The man would play musical instruments well. The hero already plays the piano, but only a little. The young man promised that he would play for his sister at the first opportunity, but she noticed that he was bad. The guy didn't respond to the comments. His face remained stony, emotionless. Even in his sleep, Rand couldn't read what was going on in his head. It was time to sleep again. The man asked if he should turn off the light, but instead of answering, the lady asked her not to kill him. She would try to raise the duchy from its knees. In the morning, the girl barely opened her eyes. She looked around, asked if it was a dream, and, having received a negative answer, jumped up in fear, not understanding what had happened. Yus decided to call a doctor first. The woman again asked not to kill her, because she was really afraid of it. Suddenly, another thought came to mind. I became interested in how the man ended up in the estate. He was just returning. It was just a coincidence. The academy has what's called early graduation, and before leaving, Romia asked her brother to get high grades, which is exactly what he did. The brunette received a report card and passed the exams a little earlier. Unless someone better appears, he will remain first on the list. Finally, the doctor arrived, as expected. The lady was overtired. This is a simple reason after all that heap of work. The blonde was advised to eat well and rest for at least a few days. She refused. There was no choice. All that was left was to take medicine to restore her strength. Yus noted that it would be better to take care of his health. There was only more work. It was just beginning. There was no way to retreat. Coming closer, the man sat the lady back down on the bed. Lazia came especially because he heard that the lady could no longer cope. In any case, the blue-eyed one fulfilled the conditions of graduation. He is not obliged to stay at the academy even longer. There is no point in it. Everything continued as the lady wrote in the letter, and all the details are described in Elizabeth's documents. Yus read this the day before the meeting. The blonde began to realize what was happening. She quietly asked if there was a man next to her at night. The answer was positive. Romy wished that she would fall through the ground. The night was not a dream, and she had said too much unnecessary things. Now only regrets remained. The woman asked him to forget about what she said. The brunette chuckled. For the first time he was told how beautiful his fingers were. The young man got ready to leave and advised him to rest. As soon as the door closed, the lady immediately fell onto the bed and buried her face in the pillow. She asked not to kill her. It could cause unnecessary thoughts. At the same time, it was for the best. The young man learned that they were afraid of him, and he could become at least a little kinder. Every time a new year comes, the Lazia family performs a ritual to protect the door. And this was the year that the stepmother and Ran took part. After the ceremony, Romia and Yus lagged behind a bit. That day, the girl returned a bit later, apparently. That was when she discovered the mana stones. In fact, killing his sister was never a priority for the young man. After the incident with the chariot, the hero realized that his unreasonable anger would now be directed at himself. Then the hero still experienced shame, anger, pain, and resentment, which filled his consciousness. Now everything switched to the deal. It was quite profitable. Elizabeth agreed with the gentleman that they could act as written on the piece of paper, and he asked how things were going with the search for a new financier. The blue-eyed one described everything as it was. She managed to select the outstanding candidates and passed the information on to the head of the family. Everything seemed to be going well for Ron. She was overtired, so Yustaf would be handling things for a while. The maid brought the lady a full cup of medicine. She had to drink it all to the last drop, although it certainly wasn't easy for her. At night, the blonde couldn't find the strength to fall asleep. She remembered that she had slept for 2 whole days before that. She had been told about this before meeting with the doctor. The girl decided to go to the library. In the corridor, she accidentally met Elizabeth and began to discuss the documents and how Yustaf was handling them. The man appeared behind her just in time. The sister immediately began to defend the manager. She herself asked to show her everything, and the friend was not guilty of anything. The brunette raised an eyebrow skeptically. The green-eyed girl heard the question. Her brother didn't even blame anyone. But it seemed to her that this was exactly the case. At that time, Elizabeth decided to go on business. When they were left alone, Romia once again confirmed that the young man had indeed grown even taller. About a month and a half had passed since their last meeting. The maiden said that she was going to the library. She wanted to listen to the doctor, but before that, she slept for 2 whole days and no longer found the strength to rest. I had to apologize for discussing behind his back. The lady wanted to know how things were going. Without answering, the young man dragged her along with him, right to the library. First, Ross was ordered to light the fireplace. His legs and hands were really cold. Sitting down in the chair, the lady said that they still had to repay the debt of 10,000 barat. It would be possible to not pay the uncle and get married. But this is not the best option, because the candidate is so terrible that the girl is even disgusted. Yus clarified that if Robbie had turned out to be normal, his sister would have gotten married. If the crystals had not been found, there would have been no way out. Money was needed. In any case, even so, the lady would hardly marry, so that no one would take possession of Ladium until she handed over her post and was not going to look for anyone to marry. The green-eyed girl's hair was disheveled. Yustaf decided to fix it, and she thanked him. Ross, standing behind, did not know what to think. They are brother and sister. There could not be such a special connection between them, but also in reality they did not have the same blood. In fact, they are strangers. The Lord was lucky that his master had already returned. He was glad that it turned out this way, as was Romija herself, and the brunette decided to ask her why she believed in him. The reason could simply be the phenomenon itself. Yus always tries hard. He is persistent and will never give up. He does not show that he is having a hard time. But all people have special problems. The young man can really do a lot, but he shouldn't overwork himself. The work can be shared with a loved one, for example, with the lady. The man raised an eyebrow, not understanding why the lady was telling him all this. since she was the one who overworked and fell, and she should be the one who allowed herself to be helped. The heroine still didn't know what to do. She wanted to rest, but also complete her studies. She was offered to rest for one day and then return to the tasks. The young man picked up the lady in his arms to carry her back to the room. At first she was silent, and then she said that the daughter of Count Illuminate had fallen ill, and even the doctors didn't know what it was. In the original, the Count says he needs medicine and betrays the Duke's family. They could have learned about this remedy through the Golden Rose. They would have helped. When the lady remained in the room, she herself returned to her thoughts again. She decided to rest a little, just for one day. They threw a bag of money and all the interest on the table to Uncle. He didn't believe what was happening and asked if Yus had sold his stepmother's jewelry. The answer was negative. Blue-Eyed asked to return the promissory note. The man was angry because at this rate the plans to undermine the Duke's family could collapse. He took one coin out of the bag to check if it was genuine barat. Obviously, it wasn't even a scam. I had to ask where my niece was. She was busy with things. Obviously, she didn't like the answer about being busy. The man was going to go and see her in person. Yustaf remained calm as he continued to speak. If the hero wished to have an audience, he should arrange a time in advance and set up a meeting. Uncle continued to shout, declaring his high status. The boy's sister, the head of the Latium house. Even in the family, there are those who are higher and lower in status, and this is normal. The brunette had to swallow his anger. He handed over the receipt and asked to tell the owner of the estate that they needed to meet. Of course, not everything was so simple. The man did not want to move from the spot until the time of the meeting was set, which would take place. When Yus closed the door, he immediately met Ross. The behavior of the relative was unexpected. But still, the head will have to tell everything. Probably she is waiting. The knight asked if it was true that they were going to trust Ran. She was only temporarily the head, but everyone in the house showed her respect, as they should. If Yus had graduated and returned back after 6 months, he would not have had the opportunity to squeeze back in. The man still said what he wanted. The woman did not understand what they wanted from her again. She specifically wanted her brother to go to the meeting. She did not want problems. The blonde nevertheless went down to the hall. She asked for forgiveness for her lateness. He immediately jumped up and noticed that Yustaf had returned earlier than expected. It turned out that the heroine herself also did not know that the man would graduate early. Even if she was surprised, it is still considered for the best. The lady was advised to be careful, to keep a close eye on things, because there are already people trying to take the head's place, and it is not worth giving it to the young man, because he does not deserve it. The woman felt uncomfortable. The old man's thoughts were incomprehensible to her. In any case, her place would go to her brother in 2 years. But the uncle said that by that time, the niece would not be safe. The hero has already started to take care of his master's affairs, which is generally logical. The girl recently fainted, which means that someone set it up. Mother Ran also asked to be given medicine for headaches, but for some reason, she never got better until her death. The doctor who prescribed the treatment for the lady was brought into the family by the Duke's ex-wife. If you think about it, 90% of the events were not described in the original. They were woven into life themselves. Still, the beauty will have to choose whose side she will remain on. Her uncle left, and she fell onto the bed without strength. It is difficult to resist such an old man. There was a knock on the door, and Yustaf immediately entered, bringing with him some cold tea. In Latium, where there is an ice wall, it is not difficult to find ice even in summer. The girl drank it all almost immediately. A joke was heard that there could be poison in it. The heroine immediately asked again, in fear, and relaxed, when she was promised that everything was fine. Of course, the lady's behavior could have been strange, but in the end, she herself was afraid that she would be killed, and she had to believe in the truth of her words. Surely the girl began to think that since they had become friends a little, they would definitely not kill her. Her thoughts had the right to exist. On the other hand, the hero would not be surprised if, on the contrary, the woman constantly suspected her brother and was cautious with all her actions. The blonde thought about it and gave an answer. She really thinks that as soon as Yus becomes the head, he will want to kill the lady, so she tries with all her might to become his best friend. Even if in the end nothing could be changed, the lady tried to calm herself down by saying that she could not do anything. A cold atmosphere hung in the room. Rising, Lucia asked another question. He wanted to know, sincerely, why the lady thought about it in such a way. Virgo cannot think that nothing can be done about her fate. She must at least have sympathy or remorse, or despair inside her. No matter what Lucia felt, her brother wouldn't like it anyway. He was going to make his intentions completely clear. Stepping back, the heroine tried to understand whether they hated her. Having let go of the lady's throat, the man walked away and said in disappointment that he didn't understand. There was silence in the room until the girl smiled slightly and decided to reveal her feelings. In fact, she felt a little guilty. Until then, Ladium had been a nuisance to the Duke for half his life, and if he had wanted to kill her, there would have been enough reason to take this step. If the brunette can do without murder, the lady will be happy. After transferring her status, she will pack her things and immediately leave the estate. The topic turned to the uncle. It seems he is well informed about the internal affairs of the family. Usually the state of the head of the house would remain classified, but the hero knew about everything, which means there are his people in the house. There are puppets in the house, most likely not even one or two of them. The blonde realized this, so she said that it would be better to eliminate these people. The stranger's goal is blackmail, which means you need to search through provocation. The man hopes that they will show themselves, and everything will be calm. Uncle was very angry. He was the second son, and received the title of Baron from his father. Mos Urus was also the one who passed on the Latium family name. But in the end, the head was the daughter of a girl who was not even related to the Duke. The gentleman's family was large, and in high society, the young man's name could attract a huge number of glances. Of course, he had a fine, high, ivory-colored estate, traditions, reputation, and money that could have belonged to Moss. The legend of the blue flame also turned out to be true. The girl was lucky, and she summoned that spirit. The master will have to hurry before the chances disappear completely. Robbie was called to his father. He was just going to carry out his plan a little earlier. Ran is a good girl, and then the young man will become the next Duke of Latium. It was summer outside, but for some reason the girl was cold again. Latium remains a cold country in any case, even if the temperature is high in other countries. In fact, in winter you could freeze to death if you didn't handle what you had to do correctly. The girl didn't quite understand why they didn't create items like a regular fan with the help of magic. The heroine stated that they needed a master. She wanted to supply the lands with items created at a low price. The brunette asked what would happen if resellers appeared. It will be necessary to hire a person who will regulate everything. Yust did not seem skeptical, given the whole situation. Next week, the first shipment of goods to the Golden Rose will be completed. There are a lot of stones, so everything will be fine. The magicians were alarmed by their desire to enter the territory of Latium. The maiden laughed. It was not for nothing that there was a ban on their entry. After Rabori showed the crystals, the Mage Association became alarmed. They weren't interested in fame and money, so it took more effort to earn their trust. With the help of even more stones, it will still not be difficult to make connections related to magic. The sending will be done very soon, but everything will be revealed only in December. It is in winter that the season of social life will begin. It is a little inconvenient that minors are not allowed there, but this can also be survived. Usually the aristocracy gets together, but only if they have no special business. The season begins in December and continues until August, during which time balls are held very often. Everything is filled with noise and carriages. To be eligible to participate, you must be over 19 years of age and have completed a coming-of-age ceremony. There is no better advertising platform than social events. Rand decided to show not only stones, but also previously unseen objects created with the help of mana. Among all the places, the most suitable place is the largest ball held in the Imperial Palace of the Golden Swan. The palace could be the first buyer. Romea had one more big task. Before the social season began, she had to go to the capital. She would need to find the second main character. Even in the novel, in order to find Rumie, at first I had to beat around the bush, but Yust distracted me from my thoughts and suggested that I take a rest. In the evening, the lady finally sank into the bath to wash away the traces of a hard day. After all, it was much easier together, and the work was finished faster. The girl was given medicine. She drank it again, because she wanted to get well soon, but instead of feeling light, she felt weak. She didn't immediately understand what had happened and tried to reach the bed, but fell right in the middle of the room because her knees buckled on their own. The maiden knew that everything was strange, but all she could do was call out to Istalif, and it seemed that his voice finally reached the man, and he appeared. At first, the heroine did not believe what she saw, but then she realized everything. The blue flame was the one she had previously summoned with the ring. No one in the Ladium family knew the spirit's real name, but somehow Milady found out about it on her own. The woman did not understand where she was. Everything was white, as if covered in fog. She remembered how she drank the medicine. Perhaps Yustaf was the one who attempted to kill the heroine. Istalif lengthened his neck and lowered his head right to the girl's face. She was so deep in thought that she needed to be distracted. I had to ask if the heroine had died, and when she received a negative answer, she became even more lost. The body had only fallen asleep, and they were in the world of the subconscious. The girl connects with the place in the subconscious only when she falls into the deepest sleep. Istalif again asked how the lady knew his name. The woman turned away. She definitely could not say that she was the creator of the world. That was not in her rules. Another spirit appeared. They all seemed to be half animal and half human. It was hard to deal with even watching. She didn't remember describing anything like that. The stranger assured that they would not hurt Ran. The one who entered the body had already died. But now the new person knew the name of the spirit, which had been kept secret. Istalif asked Blackspear to step aside and not interfere, which angered him enough that the lady now realized that in front of her was someone from another ducal family, Uzul Rose. Virgo knows the man's name, but is not sure whether to say it. She decided to blackmail and asked him to help her get out in exchange for the truth. The woman also wanted to wake up not in 100 years and make sure that she did not miss anything, because that would be strange for her. Finally, the girl revealed that she was the author of the novella she had written, and that she actually came from the Republic of Korea. The Black Spear said the strange name Phanius. It seemed to mean that the girl was reading. The two turned away and began to discuss something only among themselves. The blonde asked to stop discussing behind her back and to say everything to her face. Probably what was happening was connected with her moving back. Another spirit appeared in the distance. It was Leopard. The man noticed that, this time, they had a rather unfamiliar and new guest. The lady was attacked by a crushing feeling. Stepping back, Romea greeted almost immediately. The fog began to dissipate, going in different directions. When clouds became visible around, a table and chair appeared in the middle. Where Ran was invited, she was skeptical, but agreed in order to get answers. In the spirit world, a perfect class system has been established. A hierarchy has been defined since its very creation, which cannot be changed in any way. It exists. There is a pyramid system by status. The spirit sitting next to the lady turned out to be of the highest rank. He is one of the main ones. The Virgin told what and how much was written about the world of the novel. It turned out that she only read the created world. People call the one who reads seer. A revolution occurred in her head. The blonde became scared, because this also meant that Yustaf might not be the main character, but something else. Each reader had different ways of reading. The content and time of reading. The record of the world becomes a prophecy. Still not understanding anything, the green-eyed girl explained that she was sure that she was writing thoughts from her head. The spirit tried to explain more. He was asked how the girl ended up in the heroine's body. The leopard shook his head. He wasn't sure either. Originally, the name of the character written was the same as the author. When they both died, something happened that was not expected. The thing is that the girl didn't know all the details, and there was a door next to her when it was decided that she would be transported to another world. Now the blue flame has received satisfaction of its feelings. It is not every day that one gets to meet a reader. They are truly rare creatures. Everything around her started spinning. She went back. Because their agreement was in force, she had to return to reality immediately after the story. The woman almost fell out of bed, and yet she was unlucky. At first, the lady did not understand where she was, and jumped up to look around. Running to the mirror, she breathed a sigh of relief. Thank God. Ran was still visible in the reflection. She just didn't understand why she wasn't in her room. Only after a few moments did the blonde realize that she was in the room of the Duke's wife. She had to find a way out. In fact, the happiness was at least that the heroine remained alive, and a maid came into the room to ask how her mistress was feeling. The heroine found out what happened. First, it was decided to inform Mr. Yustaf he should talk to his sister. The young man sat and waited, because he definitely had something to say. It seemed that something had happened during the lady's absence, but she certainly didn't know. Over time, the blonde began to understand that what was happening was not a dream, but reality. It seems that up until that moment, she felt like she was in a romance and not living a full life. Now she could rejoice, because she was no longer an author who mocked her characters. She had a different mission. It's not even a work written by Ran, but she did a good deed by telling about the mines. She was able to protect Yustaf. The green-eyed girl now considered herself a good person. She turned to the maid. Having learned her name, Soda came to help. And before that, Miss Kara came, who was higher in status. If you think about it, the woman was hungry. She decided to go to a meeting and therefore went down to the hall. Having looked over the table, the lady sat down on a chair. It turned out that the brunette was very worried about her. The poison or sleeping pill had been added by the wrong person, because he wouldn't have been so stupid. The sister calmly began to eat, which was strange. She was not afraid that there would be another attempt on her life, because the guy needed her at least until the ceremony. At first, the gentleman did not want to tell what happened while the lady was sleeping. It turned out that Robbie had bribed the maid and asked her not to tell anyone anything. When the girl ran away, literally around the first turn, she met Yus and Ross. She should have been nearby. Then she would have had a chance to survive. When the man had already started to reach out to Ron, a brunette appeared behind him and put a sword to his throat. Yustaf was disgusted to see this man. When Robbie realized who was standing next to him, he immediately began to stutter and said that there had been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Blue-eyed remained skeptical, which was generally logical. The girl was put to sleep, and they tried to take her clothes off. All this is not just like that. The young man thought about pulling his sword, but he knew that then everything around would be splattered with blood. Everything that is in Latium still belongs to the master. He was able to protect his own, despite all the efforts of his stepmother. Robbie and his father tried to use Ran to take over the leadership, the conversation only continuing when his brother was pinned to the floor. The blonde, after hearing the story, could not utter a word at first. Everything that happened was initially organized by her uncle. It is quite logical that the man is simply such a person. Nothing will stop him. If Yus were the head, he would send him his daughter. Without wanting to, the young man moved the girl's room to another place. She accepted this because she understood that there was no choice in any case. The interrogation lasted for 3 days, and a lot of information was obtained from Robbie's accomplices, who happily agreed to cooperate. Baron Lindbog has already been arrested. He only repeated that it was completely unfair, but he didn't say anything more. He simply lacks imagination. It might have been easier to end things on time, since the man was arrested. It would be more difficult to get back into a future relationship. Blondie quickly suggested a good solution to the problem. The Baron's property could be confiscated, and he could be exiled to distant lands. The green-eyed girl gradually began to realize that the person sitting in front of her was not the hero she had written for her, but a full-fledged person. The girl had turned to him to clarify something. Surely the character knew that his uncle would do something. The man exhaled. He thought that the lady was too fast. In a figurative sense, the Duchess was so fast that all who chased her were unable to catch up with her and get what they wanted. What was more important for the woman was that, knowing about the plans in advance, he did not tell her anything, pretending that there was no problem with it. Blue-eyed found an explanation even for these actions. The Baron also began to act faster than he expected. It was necessary to lead him into the very dead end. The brunette deliberately did not prevent everything from happening, and he did not even hide it. Catching someone at the crime scene, as a rule, was always the easiest. The blonde understood, but it was scary to think what would have happened if her brother had been late even for a moment. Being used as bait was not on the list of plans. However, it was the lady who could not foresee her uncle's steps. She thanked him for saving her. Without help, everything would have only been worse. The young man could not tell everything in advance. At that moment, a strange fear lurked inside him. He was afraid that if the girl found out about the whole plan, the enemy would act differently from what he assumed. The heroine herself entrusted the security to Yusu. although he was given control over all issues related to the protection of the palace and its mistress. The conversation turned to something else. It was strange to mention it in the situation that had developed, but the lady reminded him how she had asked him not to kill her. At that time, the woman mentioned that if her brother wished it, she would die. But now she takes her words back. She did not intend to end her life so soon. There is no longer a sense of obligation to the beauty, so she will live more diligently, Yus agreed. This is great news for him, because he did not want to die. The brunette asked in response about the intentions to make him the head and whether the plan had changed. The green-eyed girl immediately jumped up. The task was in development. The plan was not supposed to change even a little bit. In 2 years, the man would turn 18, and then he would take the place of the head. The girl did not want to continue to do all the difficult work. It turned out that Ran never thought about what would happen to her after the contract was broken. They could have created another alliance. Other conditions would have suited everyone. The fact that the girl continued to eat while sitting at the table, even after she was almost poisoned, was stupidity. But for Yus, it seemed like courage. She would be the only person capable of betraying him. Subconsciously, no one would want to be deceived. It is difficult for a person to trust, but it seems that their union provided only this option. The blue-eyed man finally gave his consent. The blonde was immediately happy and instantly beamed. She wanted to move on to discussing the details. She just needed the money. Any amount can be spent from the duchy's balance. And although at the time of the conversation there was a negative balance, the permission was not removed when money appeared. Ran stopped her brother and his reasoning. She doesn't care what the head will spend. She needs personal money, for her as Ran. Even such conditions were agreed to, but the question remained. After Yustaf became the master, in order to remain the daughter of the Latian family, the girl would certainly have to get married. In the strange situations that could arise in a novel, the heroine must become involved with the second protagonist, but he is not her type. Yus asked to meet in the evening to discuss all the details again, and then left. Ran still didn't understand whether he liked her or hated her, yet their relationship was more friendly. The whole situation turned out to be more complicated than expected. According to Uncle Robbie's plan, he was supposed to do something terrible and then say that he did it out of love. Letting the guilty ones go would not be the best decision. Yus initially intended to send them to death, but it would be better to stop at exile. The gentleman did not want to do anything wrong. He simply insisted on his option, and the baron's son would also be prohibited from visiting his father's heavenly estate. The territories of Latium are huge, so there was a separate court there, in any case. The most important thing was that the problem with the uncle was resolved. It was necessary to pay off the debts to everyone else as soon as possible. This way it would be easier for Yustaf to live in the future. He would know that everything is okay. The young man's future was supposed to be bright, and he was supposed to be happy next to the main character, Sheena, about whom, of course, he knew nothing yet. The girl started talking about the jewelry. The first thing she wanted to do was return the money they had borrowed from the officials, because she was ashamed to look them in the eye. The amount of the first necessity alone was 50,000 barat. The rest was 200 or 300,000. It seemed that every year Latium would do nothing but pay interest. Believing the original story, the uncle became the regent of Latium. He sold off lands as if he was trying to get rid of them. In the end, he himself, along with his servants, died due to some kind of infection. And it was in this terrible state that Yus took over the family. Until then, the lady had only thought that it went without saying that the man had his difficulties. But apparently, the duchy really meant a lot to the man. The heroine snorted. If it weren't for Yustaf's honor, she would have taken all the jewelry and fled the estate long ago. The spirits revealed that the world of the novel was not actually written by Ran, but she still became attached to each character in a special way. When Ross placed 2 cups of tea on the table, deliberately spilling the leader's drink, Yus behaved like a gentleman, holding out his portion so that his sister wouldn't get her hands dirty. It turned out that the young man's actions were better than his words. The man asked again about those decorations and whether the lady would be against selling some of the jewelry. It would not be possible to get much money from resale, so the heroine was going to sell only a few pieces that were in better condition. The lady will leave the remaining jewelry for the duke's future wife. Then, when Sheena appears, It will be necessary to give her everything she needs. Time flew by. The man sent by Raboti assessed several sets of jewelry and paid a generous sum. First, the debt was paid to Wild and Lance. The barons said that the money could not be returned, but still seemed satisfied. They borrowed large sums. It was difficult for their families. Very soon, rumors began to circulate among the servants. They learned that, as head, the woman had sold all of her mother's jewelry. The blonde knew that gossip would spread, but she still hoped until the end that they would talk about how, after they sold it, the money was put aside for the family. Yustaf said that what happened was for the best. The girl did not understand at first, but then she was happy, because in this way they would be able to select people. When it is revealed that there are mana stones, of course, everything will be simpler. But while there was still time, the heroine was going to find out who works for money and who does not. It is difficult to find those who can truly be trusted. Finally, after a while, a master wizard of low birth named Lydia and a boy named Francis arrived. The maid almost immediately asked the maids to escort the two through the rooms. From the moment they entered the house, everything had to be a secret. Very soon, one of those very same mana stones was shown. It had been 20 years since anyone had seen anything like that. They are extremely rare. The blonde smiled. She had hope that with their help they would conduct research and invent. For Lazia, the stone was not so valuable, because they had a lot of them. The aim of the duchy was to make such stones generally available, regardless of whether a person had money or not. Mages are forbidden to come within a 10-kilometer radius of Latium. Masters are exempt from the rules, but they are not eager to come. They were stupid to refuse and decide to send Lydia and Francis. They will help each other. They will become the official masters of the family. The woman bowed in respect and promised that she would do everything to show a good result. The Duchess nodded. First of all, it was necessary to make a magical device that would make the blanket warm. September in Latium always forced people to dress warmly. Full-fledged winter was already due to arrive in November, and residents had to freeze until April. Yus knocked on the door of the room where the lady was sitting and entered. The girl didn't even ask who was there, because she already knew who was behind the door. It turned out that a visitor had arrived to see Ran, and it was her brother who had informed her of his arrival, because the man was truly special. Before this, they called a doctor, and a healer entered the room after Yustaf, who turned out to be an elf, just like in the novel. The man almost immediately took something out of his pocket. It was a scarlet magic stone sent through the golden rose. The maiden confirmed that she had sent a gift. The elf asked where the woman had found the stone. She wanted to talk on equal terms, because she was trying to make a deal at all costs. But it seemed that this would not work. The man introduced himself as Haresh. Ran also answered, and once again she found hope that not all was completely lost. Yus took the stone. The girl was nervous. She had not yet had time to tell him about the new find. The blonde did not think that the elf would appear so suddenly. Transparent magical diamonds can be used personally. In Latium, there are scarlet and azure stones that can only be used by elves and dwarves. The magical power of human mages begins to change, even if they just come close to such things, which is why they stay away from Latium. Haresh was about to sit down at the table, but refused tea, saying that people had disgusting tea. Yustaf also realized what kind of character the man had. Very bad. The elf, as is typical of his race, spoke without thinking about the feelings of others. He had no intention of being a kind and gentle merchant. After all, it would be easier for Latium to do business in that case. The elf noticed that throughout the conversation, the girl was trying to find out more information. He said that they have a limit on the creation of medicinal herbs. Of course, the heroine knew about this detail. She said that by adding an ointment created from the world water, they would become 10 times more effective. You can produce 10 pieces a year, but there is nowhere to use them, so the jars are stored. You can exchange the medicines for stones, considering that it will be more useful anyway. Of course, Latium plans to accept various items created by the elves. No one can outpace their race in wood processing. The girl, as it turned out, was going to cooperate with the dwarves. Haresh immediately grimaced. They would not work for the same stones as the elves. It is already known that there is some difference. Both clans have a need to trade, and with the help of Latium, this will become possible. Still, after thinking a little, The young man promised that he would discuss everything with the elders and then return back. Initially, the lady wanted another man to cure the Illuminite's daughter. It was already evening outside. They could visit her in the morning. The maiden wanted to show her a place to spend the night, but the elf was getting ready to leave. He felt stuffy in the people's house, so he promised to return at dawn. As soon as the window closed, Yusa's dissatisfied cough was heard. He wanted to listen to an explanation. The woman tried to justify herself, but it was difficult for her. As soon as the lady opened her mouth, the Duke announced that Robbie had recently died. He had gotten involved in another gambling game, but already in exile, and there he was killed. This is a disgrace for the whole family, so the blue-eyed man visited his uncle, but he simply remained silent. The man did not say when exactly the meeting took place. He simply did not want to. Finally, the maiden explained everything. The blue-eyed man decided not to ask for now how she knew all this, but he could tell how he himself could use the stones. The young man held out one of the diamonds. If he had the opportunity, he would have certainly attacked the magicians. At the very least, he could have threatened them with stones. In fact, it was the magicians who changed the conditions of the war. The woman actually thought about this option. Although she came from Korea, there was a temporary truce there, but still. Ran wanted to start by keeping the existence of the stones a secret, and then send a person to the Mage Association to tell them about their danger. The young man suggested acting accordingly with the option. Ran thought about everything and actually realized that the plan was not so bad. It was brilliant. The brunette quietly asked who Ran really was. The girl began to worry, as if someone had seen right through her. She was very bad at lying. Even her brother noticed it. To begin with, it was decided to send a letter to the Count. The young man was about to leave. Before going out the door, he asked if his sister would be able to contract. At first, the lady did not understand everything at once, but then she realized that she had said this before. It was not the best decision. But then she did not think about it. Falling face down on the sofa, the girl sighed in disappointment. It was still better to prepare a retreat plan so that no other problems would arise. The Count's mansion was quite far away. Haresh said that he found it stuffy to ride in the carriage and decided to ride sitting next to the coachman in the fresh air. Yustaf remained at the estate, so the heroine left with a calm soul. She could finally feel freedom again, after so many long months. When they arrived at the place, the woman barely got out of the carriage. Her back was stiff. She immediately began to think about the next magical invention for convenience. Illuminite met the guests at the threshold. Instead of greeting, the elf immediately asked where the patient was and where he should go. Ran tried to justify herself. After all, she couldn't lose a good relationship. The man nodded. It didn't bother him, he just needed help. When the brunette entered the room, the patient immediately grimaced and ordered to air out the room. Cold air was not the best idea, but stuffiness was even worse. As soon as Haresh was at the girl's bedside, he ordered her to extend her hand to him, examined her, asked if she had continued to take her medication, and then gave his verdict. The disease was called Shvimrikika. The medicines, it seems, began to be given after the lady became weak. Then everything began, because they became poison for her. Substances continued to accumulate in the body. People often use strong drugs unnecessarily, but now simply stopping taking what was prescribed will not change anything. The volume will simply have to be reduced gradually, and then, in 6 months, there is every chance of being healthy again. A joyful atmosphere hung in the air. Ran promised to pay, and although the Illuminite wanted to offer payment himself, he was refused. He and the lady had their own deal, not for gold. Haresh also decided to write out a small prescription. The maiden expected that, of course, it would be written in Elvish, but he wrote it in normal language and in beautiful handwriting. Blue-Eyed promised that he would visit the lady much later. It would be easier that way. He again escaped through the window, just to avoid being near people. The Count invited the girl into the guest room for a short while to talk, and the little girl's older brother went there with her. He was incredibly happy, as was his whole family. He promised that as soon as the girl got a little better, they would definitely repay the kindness with full generosity. The heroine was offered a little drink. She just smiled and answered negatively. She will drink a congratulatory glass when Lulu gets better. The Illuminite asked the Duchess directly what she wanted. He did not understand what she expected from friendship. Sitting down, she stated that in the future she would use their connections. The Count is connected to the underworld. What has an open side also has a reverse side. The man nodded. He even wanted to admire the possibilities of the duchy. Of course, it wasn't entirely clear what was going on. But the red-haired man wanted to know where and for what purposes his connections would be used. Ran wanted to make her search easier. The hero thought and promised that if he was ordered, he would try to use his powers to find the person that the lady needed. She breathed a sigh of relief. Soon after agreeing to keep the entire conversation a secret, the heroine left. In reality, Ran shouldn't have been so worried about everything since this wasn't even her world. But she couldn't stop. In a year, Rumier will have to get involved in illegal fights. He needs to be saved from this horror. The girl promised herself to do everything possible. At times, the heroine regretted that she had not described the details in more detail. Her heart was heavy only because the beauty did not know the full story. In the end, Ran was about to return. The owner was informed that the elf, unfortunately, was lost. But the girl would be fine. The young man didn't quite understand why he was so worried about the girl. His concern would be obvious if she were an ordinary aristocrat. But in her case, everything was very unbalanced. There were still many questions in Titus's head. He didn't understand how Ran managed to find out about the Count's daughter being sick, or about the magic stones. She had been chosen by the blue flame. Before this, the stone had not chosen anyone who did not have the Duke's blood. The man turned to his assistant and asked to find out in detail what the Count would do after the heroine's departure. Blue-Eyed talked to the green shadow of the house of Lazia. Although at the moment the head is the lady, the first green shadow came to Yustaf. Even earlier, the guy learned about this guild from his late mother. In any case, Romija was a temporary head. She did not need to be initiated into all matters. A secret organization can't be maintained by loyalty alone. There are incredible financial investments behind it. The man spent huge amounts of money as team money, and the girl didn't ask anything about it, so everything is fine. While Yus was thinking, he himself did not notice how the young lady returned home. The servant reported this. The blonde asked from the doorway why the man still had not had dinner. At the table, Romia explained what had happened and how the Count's daughter would be treated. The elf turned out to be a very unpleasant person, just like Aluminum himself, so it was useful to receive his favor. The green-eyed girl had worked hard all day. The brunette handed over another plate of food. Judging by how quickly she ate it all, she needed more to gain strength. There was a sudden noise. The window fell open, and an elf entered. To the indignation of the gentleman, he said that he was too lazy to use the door. Approaching the Duchess, the man extended his hand and demanded payment. It was already an hour. A few moments later, the girl returned with a small chest with a diamond. The young man wanted to say goodbye, and she said that there was still hope that they would see each other for some good reason. As soon as there was silence again, the gentleman nodded. He hoped that, with this, he would be able to engage in foreign trade. He would also have to come to an agreement with the dwarves. Tomorrow, Lacia was going to meet with the head of the Mage Association. The hero knew that it was impossible to meet them near the ice wall, so it would be more difficult. Wizards are incredibly proud. They are not going to help contact the palaces just like that. They do not even thank anyone just like that, without a reason. The next morning, Mac was on the doorstep, saying he wanted to come back with an answer. But the association said they really hoped to meet the lady. This time, the lady was not going to go alone. Her brother promised that they would go together. She did not even try to refuse, realizing that it would be better for everyone. When the two were alone, the young man took the ring with the blue flame from his pendant and carefully put it on the surprised woman. When the blonde decided to ask the first question, Lacia said that no one knew how the dwarves would behave. They could be aggressive, protection was needed. The protagonist made Ran tremble. The contract that was going to be made with the mages was very important, and most of them were quite old, which is why they might simply reject any proposals from a young girl like Romy. Despite everything, the woman felt that she was cuter than ever. She had gained something strange as soon as she got the ring back on her finger. The maid helped the Duchess dress in a beautiful outfit. Appearance was also important. The woman understood this. There was no need to give another reason to underestimate her. In the corridor, the lady met her brother. He looked normal and said that that day he was only going to be a knight. Then he was asked if the blonde was dressed up too much. The main character openly complimented her. He just thought that his sister couldn't be so beautiful usually, saying warm words. He didn't have any hidden motives. As they rode in the carriage, the girl kept going over everything in her head. The future. She said that she wanted the meeting to be a secret, but they chose such a forest wilderness that it was not easy to get there. Very soon, the delegation stopped in one of the clearings. A man in a hood appeared there. He quietly asked, clarifying whether it was true that the lady from Latium was in front of him. The meeting was supposed to take place very close. The magician asked to follow him. They used magic so that ordinary people could not see this place. The people who wanted to go with the leader came out, but the stranger objected. The girl still could not be left alone, so she proposed the defender Yustaf as a candidate. For about 10 minutes, everyone followed the forest path. The heroine's eyes widened when a luxurious place appeared ahead that she had not seen before. The girl walked inside and immediately said hello. The game was just about to begin, but she was already ready to put everything into it. After some time, the leader realized that the girl, who had only recently become the leader, was not as simple as expected, and this knight standing behind her was getting on his nerves even more. The young man seemed to be directly involved in this conversation. It was unclear how it was possible for the guard to show his presence so strongly. The beauty calmly explained that she was not asking for anything impossible, as long as the Association of Magicians did not intend to become an enemy of her, that is, of her duchy. Nevertheless, the gentleman agreed. In exchange, they would keep silent about the fact that there were colored ice crystals in Latium, and they also wanted to get a small amount of them to conduct experiments. Once everything was decided, the girl stood up. They did not want to leave the estate unattended for long, so of course, they got ready to leave. On the street, the magician asked who was his mistress. She smiled and said that it was her younger brother. He immediately realized that it was good that they came to an agreement, because the next chapter was in front of him. They said goodbye. The girl was glad to meet Mr. Regent. Near the carriage, the knights immediately rushed to Ron. She said that everything went well, only because Yustaf was next to her. All the affairs were completed safely. Still, there was a strange aftertaste left. Romaya was sure that during the negotiations they would start threatening her, using magic, or at least raising their voice. Although some of them seemed emotional from time to time, but quickly collected their thoughts again, it still seemed that the magicians were very balanced people, or perhaps they were frightened by the knight's energy. Blue-Eyed was skeptical. The girl assumed that something would go wrong and still wanted to go, leaving all the knights behind. She objected. Without sitting down at the negotiating table, she could not even start them. Of course, the blonde could have insisted on taking them with her, but she had no desire to start with a bad mood, and she needed good allies. Yus was a good choice as a knight. The young man smiled casually. He justified it by saying that he had been made to laugh a lot lately. He adjusted the clothes on the lady's shoulders. As they climbed the mountain, the temperature would continue to drop. A few days later, there was snow in Latium. Winter in the duchy is fierce, but even despite its incredible cold, it is very warm there thanks to a magical item created with an ice crystal. In a high society, the best advertising is a personal presentation of a product rather than empty words. The girl wanted their product to become a hit. When the lady went outside, she found that her clothes were too heavy. The knight decided to help the lady get on the horse. She thanked him. Even if the lady falls off the horse, it won't hurt, because the clothes are too thick. Finally, it's time to climb into the door. She's been waiting for this for a very long time. There was a great sorceress Abria. If you think about it, she was really incredible, because with the help of magic, she froze an entire proud ridge. Romea once read about it. There's even a painting in the estate of this girl freezing the mountains and a door. And behind that door is something even more important. When they finally arrived at the place, the lady could barely get off her horse. Her knees were shaking, but she assured them that everything was fine and she could continue walking. There were no cracks or patterns on the door, except for the symbol of Latium itself. The man took off his necklace and ring and handed it over to his sister. The woman put on jewelry. These simple actions are New Year's customs that the family is obliged to carry out every year. This ceremony is important. Only the head of the family can do this. And although Ran was currently doing it herself, eventually the responsibility would fall on her brother's shoulders. It seems that everything went quite well this year. Every year you have to perform a ritual that doesn't even take much time. There's still one big thing left to do. You'll have to get on your horse again and go down. When they went out, Yustaf offered to go with him. The girl sat behind, suddenly noticed that he seemed to have become even taller, which was strange. The heroine lightly touched his hair and said that it was just the appearance of sisterly love. The horse suddenly neighed, and they almost fell. After it was all over, the man laughed. The hero still decided to ask. It was like love. The green-eyed girl said that she knew little about Yustaf's mother. She asked what kind of person his mother was, hoping that it was not too rude. The woman was very proud in a good and bad way. Because of her illness, she did not like the weather in Latium. Her sister agreed. Her mother also especially hated winter. There is no one who would like the weather of the northern regions. In reality, everything was much more complicated. The news that while the Duchess was dying, her husband proposed to another completely ruined her. The blonde froze. It turns out that the Duke was a bad man. Although the girl tried to raise her son in love, in the end she was chosen. The brunette completely forgot about it. For some reason, he feels as if every now and then he too easily reveals his whole soul. When they arrived, the girl asked them to quickly drive the horses and change clothes, because the New Year's party was about to begin, for the knights too. It turned out that the head distributed all the principal amounts and interest on the debts, according to their root causes and dates. The expected creditors were very interested in where such money came from. It seemed that some of them even wanted to cooperate with the duchy, but the woman refused. Next year, they were planning to have a huge party. Now everything was already fine. Remija was sitting at the table and drinking, but Yustaf came up and gave her a glass of water to sober up a little. As soon as it became more clear what was going on, the blonde noticed that he was in the academy uniform. Of course, the girl does not have a fortune, but she could buy her brother one suit. He looked closely, noticing that the dress was a little short. This dress belonged to her mother, and she was shorter than her. The Duchess was an elegant lady. She always bought suitable jewelry, dresses, and shoes for the new year. Thus, dressing from head to toe, she said that this was a kind of payment for the fact that she lived too far away and could not get to the New Year's celebration at the Imperial Palace. Compared to the wives of other families, the lady was always ahead of fashion. Although because of this, the duchy went bankrupt. Everything changed with the sale of stones. A young man distracted her from her thoughts. He invited Ran to dance. The woman said that she was a bad dancer, but she was assured that they would help her with everything, and as soon as the music started, the couple began to dance. Everything was fine, until the moment when the lady accidentally stepped on her partner's shoe. Blue-Eyed swallowed his hurt and pain and said that he agreed that the lady really couldn't dance. He just didn't want Lazia to lose face, which was logical. The sister knew that their family was a very ancient lineage with its own traditions and glory, but she could not say that this was something incredibly important to her. Besides, it was cold there, and everything was not very good. Everything on the territory belongs only to Yustaf. His mother has been telling the young man since childhood that he needs to be calmer and find a compromise, without expressing emotions. Sister should have practiced dancing before leaving for the capital. When the music ended, another began, and the lady was invited to a new dance, although they saw how bad she was. The knight laughed after a while, noting that his skills really needed to be improved. The conversation turned to Ross. He was too unceremonious, but there was no point in thinking about that. The man had served only the master since childhood. Perhaps he treated him like an elder brother. The lady did not worry about such things. She also liked Yustaf very much. In fact, the future head will remain quite loyal. He rather doesn't like his sister's actions. It's immediately clear that it's not very good when feelings have to be shown. After the dance, the lady went to eat, as expected. Half of the snacks were already gone. She had to take something else, from what the girl also really liked. The green-eyed girl found herself on the balcony. The air was cool, maybe because there was too much alcohol in her blood. Everything was swimming before her eyes. Snow was falling on all sides. The girl let her hair down and sat on the railing. Yustaf's voice was heard. And, turning around, the heroine began to scream, calling him to her. She almost fell down, but at the last moment, she was caught. The brunette breathed a sigh of relief. Everything didn't end so badly, but the lady should have been more careful and not behaved so irresponsibly. The green-eyed girl asked to smile. She was not going to die so easily. The girl showed all the signs that she should have stopped at the first drinks. When another reproach was heard, the woman grimaced with displeasure. It was all her brother's fault, because he continued to be stubborn. For him, what was happening was strange. The blonde bowed her head to Ladium and kissed him on the top of his head. She continued to try to make their duchy better. But for some reason, no one appreciated her efforts. The girl would like to be treated kindly, and also affectionately. In fact, she has long wanted something more, so as not to be afraid for her future and life. When the blonde was asked if she loved Lazia, she said that it was all very relative. After all, she doesn't work so hard to show her love. Partly, everything is done for Yustaf. In fact, the lady needs it too, because she has no other refuge except the duchy. She simply has no choice. The hero commented that the woman was heartless, but she continued to ask to be treated right. Suddenly a strong wind blew. Ran almost fell again, but she was caught by the hand. Blue-Eyed didn't throw off his sister, because he made her a promise. It's not worth saying such things, since the girl deep down in her soul knows in advance what will happen to her. This is right. Yus picked up the woman in his arms. The blonde was very cold. Her lips were blue, so it was decided to go back to the estate, inside, to warm up. At the entrance to the mistress's chambers, they were met by a servant. She immediately noticed the state of the Duchess and offered to prepare a warm bath. At this time, Yustaf went to another training session. As the master requested, Ross appointed a capable person as a guard, so that Ran would not have any further problems. The sister believed in promises, although in reality it was strange. Her life depended on one single moment. But in reality, everything is more complicated than just a moment. The next morning, Ran was hysterical. She blamed herself for her behavior, because of the alcohol she had behaved incorrectly. She behaved like an older man who was trying to cling to a girl. It was decided to go and apologize first, so the lady went to the gentleman's office as soon as she got ready. The lady immediately asked for forgiveness, but the young man said the same thing in response. The brunette calmly explained that he forgave the lady for her strange behavior. He should be kind and gentle. This is exactly what the beauty said when they had a conversation. The man brought up something else, and it was a positive reaction. He had already mentioned that she needed to take up dancing, but now he reminded her again that she should take it up seriously. The heroine nodded. She wanted to mention something else. She wanted to change the sugar production so that they could eat it whenever they wanted. The blue-eyed one thought that it was available to them. In the capital, everyone was interested in the wings of the heavenly stallion. When the thing was put on a horse, transparent, shiny wings appeared. As far as the heroine knew, the empire was the first to do this, and then the rest of the nobility followed suit. Latium, as a supplier, was obliged to give the Golden Rose a small percentage. The girl was only afraid of meeting the Empress. She knew that as soon as she found out about the crystal mining, she would immediately start demanding a huge tax. The emperor gave lands and titles to his vassals about 300 years ago, but the duchy is different from them, because it is an ancient family that already existed at that time. It was called the Protector of the Door. In fact, magicians can approach the ice wall, so the first emperor was not able to reach the lands and drive out Latium. The leader bowed his head, but also paid very low taxes. The blonde understood that once they had a mine, everything had to change. Previously, they had excuses about poverty, but now they would have to ruin their relationship with the ruler. Yustaf suggested doing as they had agreed. Earlier, there had been talk about slightly increasing the tax before the royal retinue set its sights on the duchy's property. The next day, the lady got ready to leave. She did not want to leave the estate immediately after the new year, but also did not want to miss the good weather. Such an opportunity rarely arises. Before leaving, Ran promised that she would bring something as a gift. Because of the snow, she was forced to move around on a sled. But with the help of heating and clothing, everything was quite bearable. When the lady arrived in the capital, a whole month had passed. It was very warm there. Yet, compared to the north, Being in this place was ideal. The lady was happy about this, and did not even regret that she spent too much time on travel. Compared to the winter wind of Latium, the cool breeze in the city moderately froze the skin, forcing one to relax. The woman received many invitations to events and conversations almost immediately upon arrival. Rabori met with Milady first. Everyone already knew that the most popular person was Romea, although the family still did not take direct part in trade. There was no established order for doing business in the country, and it seemed impossible for the head of the duchy to engage in trade directly. So Latium had to find a way out and hire a team. To advance the ice crystals, an audience with His Majesty would be needed. But it had already been scheduled. Ribadi asked to be careful not to die at the hands of Marquis Camorin. He used to be the sole owner of the mine, although they said he wasn't a very good trader, so now even his small income should have been cut off. The reason why diamonds are so expensive is because they are so rare. If you look at the volume of stocks, it seems like there are quite a lot of them, and all this is, of course, due to marketing. Ran had a clear plan. Rabori had to tell everyone that despite the fact that the Imperial family had the right to use the services of magicians, they also had ice crystals. For the upper classes who desire special magical items created by the elves and dwarves, Latium will sell them at exorbitant prices, and all this will only fill the treasury. Rumors spread very quickly. They were all about the future reception in the duchy. Then it became impossible to get an invitation, because it was given only to sufficiently influential aristocrats. Along with popularity came negative talk. Many discussed the chapter specifically, saying that it did not deserve anything good, because it does not even have the blood of the deceased duke flowing in it. Ran tried not to pay attention to the gossip, because she didn't care. She had her own plan. The number of suitors was growing, although she said that she definitely wasn't going to get married. The lady was once again presented with a bouquet, but this time it was unusual, because it consisted only of flowers that grew in the south. The maids exclaimed that every woman dreams of something like this, but the woman had her own ideas. Soon Rolf reported that Marquis Cameron had come to see the lady. The man had tried to arrange a meeting more than once, and finally Rand decided to come out and talk to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. Initially, she was offered to simply skip, but it was impossible to refuse so easily. After all, the man most likely would not calm down. Having gone down to the main hall, the girl greeted him. The old man did the same in return, albeit with reproach. He was definitely irritated. The girl seemed impudent to him, just like to many who spread nasty rumors. The Marquis began with the most important thing, because he came to give the last warning. A person who is not part of the aristocracy does not know the rules, but they still exist. The green-eyed woman started the game, only to eventually become a monopolist and deprive Cameron of everything he had acquired. They say that he himself had recently begun to attract master magicians, so his words made no sense. The woman tried to remain calm and reasonable. She decides what price to set for her goods, so she does not see the need to listen to the opinion of another person. When Cameron rasped that the guild belonged to him, he received a reasonable answer. Magicians cannot belong to just one person. Out of anger, the old man jumped up and ran away. Perhaps he would send a deputy. Blaine nodded when the girl asked to strengthen security. Of course, the brunette wasn't sure how possible his request was, but the head should have skipped some social events. Unfortunately, the lady had no choice in this case. The girl asked if they would attack Latium itself. It was too cold to start military action. Winter was not over yet, and moreover, the Emperor's permission would be needed. There was still time to think. Someone knocked. The maid announced that Madame Rabori had arrived. She introduced Madame Nuaz. She speaks with the accent of northern royal blood. Almost immediately, the girl asked the head to change her dress. The beauty's clothes were old-fashioned. Everyone in high society knows how to dress properly. But, of course, the girl came from the north. She does not know about this and all the necessary details. The beauty was helped to choose the best dress, and now she finally went to an audience with Her Majesty. The woman was offered to sit in an empty seat, informed that the prince's wife would also be present. A few hours before the meeting, the girl was enjoying tea. She was happy that Lazia would sell her that very stallion stone. The peace was interrupted when the princess asked for an audience. Olivia Fran Lamartelle was allowed into the hall. She is elegant and graceful, but she cannot take care of her husband. The woman immediately asked how the couple was doing. Their relationship is a separate topic. The lady's concern, of course, was the prince. It is not known where this came from in his blood, but he was a dissolute man. The lady married him to a wise duchess, but it turned out that he already had 2 illegitimate children. Lazia didn't know, but the master told his wife that the lady was good and probably better than Olivia. The prince was the weakest, which meant the princess would become the intermediate boss. The duchess did not want to become an enemy of the future ruler. Initially, the green-eyed one heard a lot of gossip, but did not believe that all of them were true. Olivia showed up a little later and asked for forgiveness. Of course, the lady forgave her, because there was no problem with that. They had to move on to the conversation itself as soon as possible. Since the duchess and the princess had not met in person before, they had to introduce themselves to each other. Lazia said that it was an honor for her to meet Her Highness. The blonde soon noticed that the heater was turned on almost completely. The crystal should soon be used up at this rate. The conversation turned to the head of the Golden Rose. She is half-elf. Olivia thought that she couldn't be trusted, and that nothing should be given into her hands at all. The girl gave the answer that Rabori instructed her to, who seemed to know what would happen. One of the ladies, who was also present, suddenly said that she heard that Camoran personally came and threatened. The blonde thanked her for her concern, but there was just a misunderstanding between them. The Marquis family also has a long history and has been loyal to the royal family, of course, but Ladium could boast the same. The duchy has several advantages associated with the stones received from the first and the ruler of Lyon, which means that Cameron should not meddle where it does not belong. The woman tried to change the subject, doing it delicately. She was glad that she could eat her fill of sweet and luxurious dessert. She hoped that Latium would also be able to make sugar soon. The girl finally came out of the meeting. She looked tired and was about to go and rest, but then she ran into the prince. He immediately turned to her. His luxurious appearance matched the man's status, but inside he was a real libertine, so it was a little unpleasant for the lady to communicate with him. The young man couldn't help himself. He knew that the daughter of the duke's family was beautiful, but when he saw her, he realized that she was still much better. The woman laughed awkwardly, saying that she couldn't compare to Olivia. The blonde did not want to talk, especially when she was very tired. She said that if an invitation was sent, then they could talk about this topic. The prince was still able to persuade Ladium to take a short walk in the garden, but the hero was simply a womanizer, because he began asking indecent questions, and when the lady asked him not to talk about it, the young man reacted strangely. The girl was able to leave. She was not pleased with his company. The gentleman thought about what would happen if he enlisted the support of the future head of Yustafa and asked him to help. Once Yus becomes the head, as it should be, Ran will remain of no use to anyone, and all that remains is to pick up her words. Fallen fruit. The big day had arrived. The lady had ordered the maids' uniforms, and now, finally, they were to be delivered to the place. Everyone wanted to see how the clothes would fit them. The new collection was intended to strengthen the sense of belonging to Latium, and with this, Romeo also planned to reinforce the family's unshakable image. Everything was fine, except for the prince, who spoiled the whole mood. In the original, he was already dead. But in reality, he caused a lot of problems, because rumors had already spread that he had fallen in love with the Duchess. The woman could not withstand the pressure. She had no other options but to ask for an audience with His Majesty, because only the Emperor could stop her son. Suddenly, a servant ran in. It turned out that a military man had arrived. It was a herald with a declaration of war on behalf of Cameron. The heroine herself went down to immediately read the letter. The Marquis' army had probably already begun to act, which meant it was on the territory of the duchy. The blonde was skeptical. She didn't expect everything to happen so soon. A feeling of loss overwhelmed the lady. She took many of their knights with her to the capital. Only Yustaf remained. She would not have had time to return anyway. Blaine asked the woman to believe in the best. The knights did not understand who could have thought of invading the duchy during winter. Apparently, the army's actions were aimed more at robbing ordinary people than at attacking. Yustaf was angry that the Marquis had allowed this to happen. The road through the valley was covered with dust like earth, and in winter it turned into mud, making it difficult to move. It seems that Cameron thought that since the leader left and took the knights with her, there was almost no one left in Latium. They believed that they could easily win, because Yustaf still does not know how to use the blue flame. After some time, it became clear to everyone that the duchy's chances of winning were increasing, and one of the knights stepped forward and demanded to engage in a duel. Taking off his helmet, the young man introduced himself as Agol, the eldest son of the Marquise. The brunette believed that he would be able to win during the battle. In terms of build, they were roughly similar to Latium. After 10 minutes of the duel, it became clear that the Marquise would lose. A sword was put to his throat. Recently, the war is considered suspended, because knowing that they were caught, they do not kill. Yustaf did not want to put up with anything on the territory of Latium. He made it so that the young man could never breathe again, and immediately the cries of the knights were heard, praising him. As soon as the man met the lady, his sister immediately ran towards him. They hugged, because she was very worried. Yustaf spoke to her. The hero's voice changed. He seemed to become more masculine. During this time, his height also increased. He no longer looked like an ordinary boy, and began to resemble more the one who would one day take the reign of the duchy into his own hands. Yust didn't think that the girl would be so happy to see him. She said out loud that the young man had become different now. The suit was a little unsuitable. The girl hadn't seen this option before, but it didn't look like a new one. The brunette said that Ross gave him the clothes because he needed something new. The blonde suggested choosing something else quickly and asked if the young man had gotten hurt during the duel. The hero explained that everything was fine and that he didn't need care. The woman shook her head. Even if her brother was a legendary warrior, he would still be at risk. In fact, about 3 days after the war began, someone asked the lady for an audience. The lady nodded. She asked to let in the one who was waiting for her in the corridor. She was eager to find out why they had come to see her. The second shadow of the head greeted the girl and said that there was nothing to worry about, because Yustaf was confidently winning. In Latium, as it turned out, there was a secret organization about which the lady knew nothing. The man was confident of victory because the master was ready for it. However, apparently, the Marquise made a deal with the emperor that in case of victory, he would give up half of the mines. The lady finally realized why she was being ignored. The king was trying too hard to grab an advantage that would never come. All of Laban's pocket money went to the guild. The girl asked to find out everything about the ruler's second son. Now, 3 days later, the beauty was choosing an outfit for her brother. She asked about his height. He was almost 180 centimeters. Not long ago, they were the same. Everything changed. It turned out that the Marquis wanted to challenge the gentleman to a duel, but it seems that nothing would come of it. The man asked to finish the fitting later and turned to the lady, asking why she was trying to find out information about the prince. The heroine wanted to start a rebellion. There was no other reason. The woman exhaled. She wished that the man would not become the next ruler. The girl's words seemed to indicate that she didn't want to be in this country. She was behaving strangely. The young man sat down next to her and asked what had happened. The lady shook her head. She couldn't tell her brother the information. The brunette exhaled. In any case, they are not related. Then the heroine lost her temper and told about all the unpleasant comments. Because of the gentleman's behavior, the woman wanted to support the princess who did not love the blonde. The brunette listened to everything. He looked calm, but said that he would then talk to the man about everything himself. The girl didn't immediately understand what this was all about. She could have met him on her own and pretended that they weren't on bad terms. The blue-eyed man turned away. The lady was still amazed at how such an emotionless man fell in love with Sheena. Everyone wanted to meet Yustaf. His exploits had reached the capital. He also needed to resolve the situation with Cameron. At first, it seemed that the lady would ask about the green shadow, but she did not want to start this conversation. For the blonde, nothing mattered. There was less than a year left until the end of her term in office. The heroine completely forgot that she asked to find out about the juice of the snow-white tree. The man brought a sample with him. Now in Latium, they could eat sugar as much as they wanted and make various desserts and drinks from it. A few days later, a meeting was held between Laban and Cameron in the Crystal Hall of the Imperial Palace. People lined up just to see Yustaf. He seemed incredible to them. Still, it was hard for the lady to hear the cries of the Marquise, who had lost his son and even his heir. A whole line of people wanted to talk to the man. The girl tried to move away from the crowd. A scream was heard. Cameron's daughter was incredibly angry. She wanted her brother back. When the woman swung at the head, the brother pulled her aside. The guards had to do their job. Yus did not kill the Duke. He was devoured by his father's ambitions. If the maiden was dissatisfied, she was obliged to turn to her father. Perhaps the young man would not have said anything if the stranger had attacked him, but she swung at his sister, who was defenseless. What happened in the corridor of the Crystal Hall was on everyone's lips for a long time. Some were against the Marquise's daughter, and some pitied her. Along with this, rumors began to circulate that the cold man was treating Ran with trepidation. The lady was talking to Ridget. They were discussing the latest happenings in high society. The girl was happy to finally find a friend. In the capital, this was a very difficult task. Not everyone could do it. Being the Marquise's wife was quite a heavy burden for her, although she was asked not to worry about anything. But this was unrealistic. The blonde asked not to think about it so much. In any case, the Empire likes Ridget. She won't have any problems. The woman lost her temper and started asking questions about Latium, first asking about the ice wall. The lady couldn't just leave, so she began to answer, trying to smile, and her friend asked to invite her to the estate. The beauty suddenly remembered that the lady seemed to be in a difficult situation lately because of the crown prince. Ran is actually quite tired and hopes that it will all end soon. They pester her more and more, and Olivia's look becomes angrier. In any case, the lady was going to talk about this with His Majesty, since business with the Marquis was already finished. When the conversation on this topic came to an end, Ridget suggested that next time they go on a picnic with her family. The princess, as it turned out, continued to use protection even after the wedding. An heir is the only way to take power for herself, which means the lady is probably thinking about something else. Yustaf was distracted because a guest arrived to see him, who turned out to be the crown prince. The blonde didn't want greetings and formalities. He came to talk as a person. He had his own desire. The hero wanted to say that he was on the side of the heir, who knew that the Duchess was still more famous than him. Blue Eyes must take care of his role and future, because soon Ran will no longer be the mistress. The prince wanted to help. No matter how good the Duchess was, she did not belong to the Latian family. If she lost support, she would become an ordinary person. The woman will leave herself, because she will not be able to remain on the controlling side when, for example, she becomes pregnant. Yus easily refused. After the meeting, he had a desire to wash himself because he was incredibly disgusted. No, there was nothing to worry about. The gentleman assured his sister that everything would be fine and asked if she would like to return to Latium. The youth also received the report about the second prince that the leader had originally requested. The brunette still felt strange. He understood that you can't trust anyone. Especially, you need to be careful with someone who says that he loves. Blue-Eyed asked what his sister would do if she was betrayed. She jumped up and threw up her hands in displeasure. The girl chuckled. It would probably hurt her a lot. And then he would meet again with that Ran who used to be evil. If a man decides to do something like this, it is better to warn him in advance so that Romia does not become a hindrance to him. When the woman picked up the report sheet, she realized that it was impossible to read what was written. The conversation turned to the crown princess. She was constantly picking on Ran and was not someone who wanted to be kind. The woman asked her brother to rewrite everything in his normal handwriting and finally received answers to her questions. Ravel Monia Lamartelle is 2 years younger than the crown prince. He will be 26 years old. There was nothing to catch on to. The paper accidentally caught fire. It seems that a blue flame came out. This is enough to scare someone who doesn't know. The girl decided to meet with the second prince. She wanted to ask for an audience, but the man had another option. All the wives throughout the ages in Latium have tended a garden to compensate for their infertile lands, yet this place is worthy of being called the Green Arch. When the gentleman met Romija, he began to understand why his brother continued to run after her. The brunette did not think that he would be invited alone. She had a personal interest in him, which was different. Perhaps the green-eyed girl wanted to show that she was interested in Ravel as a groom, since his brother was already taken. After drinking the tea, the young man froze. The sugar was different from what he had tried earlier, but it was even more delicious. The young man immediately warned that he did not like the noise. and did not like being used, but they explained to him that for now they were having a friendly meeting. When they got up from the table to take a short walk in the garden, Ravel noticed someone in the bushes, and Yustaf came out from there. The prince greeted the future leader. He had heard about him, but he remained skeptical, because it was probably just another rumor. When they said goodbye, the man laughed. It will be difficult for the Duchess to get married because of her family. The girl has an incredible younger brother, and the lady agreed with this, because she considered him one of the best people in her life. For now, Ran has everything, but if Yus really wants to gain power, he will first have to expel his sister. The Duchess could always rely on His Highness, but she shook her head, because she thought that she would never come to him. The next day, the lady was getting ready. Yustaf sat next to her, while she was being prepared for going out and having her makeup applied. Finally, when everything was finished, the woman understood what needed to be done to prepare for the exit, the last appointment. After that, she would be able to rest. It was hard for the blonde. She couldn't, like other girls, enjoy finding a husband and social evenings. For Ladium, the road to high society was covered with ice. It was a place where attractions and repulsions took place. Before getting into the carriage, the lady expressed her hope that she would return soon and not be tired. In the first 10 minutes of the reception, Ran met with the head of the Miro clan, the elder brother of Crown Princess Olivia. He was honored to meet the lady, and he introduced himself as Duandosk Lamiro, speaking calmly. The influence of the duchy was heard even in distant lands, and the lady tried precisely for this purpose, to gain publicity. The first reason why the family was called White Silver Miro was because of their excellent hair color, and the second was because they owned a large mine of white silver. Their duchy was located closer to the center, which is why it has traditionally had the closest relationship to the emperor since ancient times. Thanks to the mine, the family has a high status in political circles and has a solid capital behind them. When the man reminded her that he was Olivia's older brother, the girl immediately said that she and the prince were perfect for each other, and she didn't want to make threats. The voice of the future emperor was heard. He said something about a bright future, but the lady did not listen. She wanted him to leave. The man, without thinking twice, invited the lady to dance. He was not embarrassed by anything, because everyone should already know that he was in love. There was nothing left to do but pretend that the Duchess was fainting. Blaine was thanked for helping carry the lady out. He felt sorry to see the prince's bad manners. The woman didn't know how this story would affect her, but she hoped that she and Miro would not become enemies. During dinner, the lady told her brother everything, and she was still very angry, because she didn't know what to do. A letter arrived. It seems that Rumia was found, and in a few days they were also supposed to attend Marquis Kirkus' picnic. The girl was supposed to attend such an event for the first time, but the same thing happened in her brother's life. While the lady was thinking, everyone left. The young man suggested dancing, which was strange. They didn't even have music. Yustaf stood up and pointed to the music box, in which case they started dancing. It wasn't that bad. Rand began to think that it wasn't just the man's height that had changed. It was as if he had become a completely different person, especially in his dance. By chance, the heroine stepped on her foot again. This time she was even more absent-minded, but she wanted to try. Soon the dance was over. The room was filled with good energy, which made the soul feel good. The time had come to send a letter in response to the count. The girl was already getting ready for bed, but first she sat down at the table and picked up paper and a pen. Obviously, it was her responsibility to rescue Rumie, but if she took on all of this personally, she would be in danger. The woman sent a message. She was still glad that the hero was found so quickly. She went to rest. In the morning, the girl was ready. She understood that a busy day awaited her, because they were going to Yelenia Park. Bridget was delighted to attend the first picnic of the new season and couldn't stop talking about it. When the girl learned that this was the first such outing in the Duchess's life, she looked surprised. For her, everything was fun. When the man noticed that the lady liked everything, she was indignant, because she was happy to spend time with her favorite people. Yustaf introduced himself to the Marquis. Initially, he spoke about how his sister was an outstanding person. The two agreed on their interest in chivalry. Yus would like to hear a story, since Karak once managed to single-handedly catch Zeronicle. Bridget raised an eyebrow in displeasure. They went out to the lake shore to have a picnic, But the stories reeked of blood. It became disgusting. Ran was actually enjoying her first vacation in a while, but because of someone who came later, the joy died. The first guest was Haresh, who, as usual, grimaced when he asked how people didn't feel disgusted being next to each other, like in an anthill. The man brought a sword that the lady had ordered as a birthday present for her brother. The woman thanked him. It was not a problem for Haresh, but it turned out that elves are not very good at handling metals. The sword was also not metal. Virgo knows a lot, but not everything. They work with Sheva, and for her, magical processing is enough, nothing more. It turns out that in that world, high-quality and cheap metal weapons also sell well, and it is easier for them to handle them. Less than a week later, another guest arrived, and the girl invited Fulton to sit down at the table and finally talk. The woman wanted to communicate in this simple way, so that it would be easier to feel the atmosphere. The lady asked about the tea leaves and clarified whether they had been found, to which she received a suspicious question. Why were they needed at all? The sheets seemed to be in poor condition. Their quality was terrible. Perhaps they contained memories. The fact that the Count spoke of this meant that Rumier had most likely been taken to the arena. The maiden thought that she had more time left. Finally, the red-haired man understood what was being discussed, but the task was not easy, because apparently they were making money on tea leaves illegally. If the flower withers, it is unknown what will happen to the leaves, so the plant must be delivered with roots. Rumier had a younger sister. She had health problems, and therefore she died after several months of fighting. The blonde believed that the young man was not yet in the arena, so she did not think about it. But now the girl is important. Since the buyer has stepped into all the dirt, they want to use and destroy him. Illuminite promised to find out about the flower. The woman considered whether to ask Rabori to intervene. After all, she was a good protection for anyone who cooperated with her. After the maiden ceased to be the head, Rabori probably didn't stab her in the back. She's not that kind of person. There were also thoughts about the prince in her head. After all, the lady had to meet with the emperor to ask him to keep the guy in check. The heroine was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Yustaf approaching, and she accidentally spilled the tea right on her dress. The robe still belonged to the Duchess's mother. She had hemmed it well, but still something was wrong. The young man noticed that more delicate colors suited his sister and switched to what he had been talking about with the Count. They discussed common affairs with Illuminite, but did not plan anything against him, because they respect Yustaf. So the brother and sister threatened each other's position, especially considering the fact that they did not share the same blood. While the woman was thinking about how to explain herself, the hero began to smile, asking again to change clothes. Already in the evening, the blue-eyed man finally checked who the Count was looking for, and this man turned out to be a slave who was fighting in the arena. It would have been more effective to search for a person with the green shadow, but the girl hid the fact that she was searching for an unknown slave. The young man did not know if they were somehow connected in the past. He ignored his feelings and asked to assign security to the lady. Going out into the garden in the evening, the hero was surprised that his sister was completely alone. There was absolutely no one nearby. It was strange. The blonde shrugged her shoulders. She had no need for knights on the estate grounds. That was true. The girl would not mind learning to swing a sword, because she wanted to be able to protect herself. Since the girl could not sleep, she could be escorted to the school palace. The man lifted the head in his arms to carry it. Blaine came at the most inopportune moment and did not understand what was happening. He was asked to bring slippers. The beauty did not have an appointment with the knight. He probably had a date with one of the maids. When they arrived, the gentleman decided to start from the very basics. The girl still wanted to learn. Yus handled the sword perfectly. The movements seemed simple, but the lady knew that this would not happen to her. The young man dropped to one knee and began to wipe the beauty's feet. Slippers cannot be put on dirty feet. From now on, the green-eyed girl was strongly asked not to leave the house without shoes, as this is not according to the rules of etiquette. After that, the hero took up the sword. What he showed earlier was only a part. It will be more difficult further. In the castle, from the very morning, there was a conversation between Olivia and her brother. He did not understand what the prince was thinking about and why he allowed himself to be obscene. Miro is still needed by the kingdom, so the maiden will be of help, and over time, the master will understand that his wife needs to be treated well. The lady understood why her man fell in love with Ladium, but she was not so simple to deal with. The head was angry at the Duchess. Their family was generally an accidentally rolled stone, but Miro could not even receive the same treatment with them. Latium is an ancient land. The ice wall, the heavenly estate, and the door were there even before the first emperor appeared. Although Ran is the head, she is temporary. She will soon lose her power. Then she will become the prince's plaything and will be thrown out. The sister noted that she might even be jealous of Lazia, but she had her own path and her own plans for the future. The prince sent the lady flowers again, but she had received money from Rabori, so she had to take care of her duchy. The girl asked her friend to make a fake ID, all for visiting the slave. Rabori agreed to do everything for free, and the conversation turned to the fact that the explosive contract would soon end. All this was worth lending 1 million. Rabori wanted to offer to extend the contract for another year. The lady would like to raise the price of crystals by 20% and the purchase price by 5%, giving a deposit of 10 million. The heroine suggested to the leader that, as soon as she was no longer the leader, she joined their trading guild. The prince was furious because he was not allowed to show up at the ball. Miro also intervened in this. The young man did not leave everything and decided to talk to his father. Blue-Eyed came from afar. He said that he had found a plan to divide Latium. The emperor would also like to receive the suddenly grown duchy. The offer had to be one that couldn't be refused. The king nodded and asked what the plan was. The next day, permission to enter the castle arrived for Yustaf. It was unclear why this was necessary. Whatever it was, the lady put aside her worries. She almost began to breathe easier. She would be glad that the young man would go to social events. For the first time, the hero had to go to a ball in the Imperial castle, for which he would have to wear new clothes. Rumors that Laban would soon appear at the ball spread throughout aristocratic society. The garden where everything took place was filled to the brim with objects created using ice crystals. The arrival of the Latian family was announced. People looked at them attentively because everyone was interested. Her Majesty the Empress personally greeted the couple and was happy that they were able to come. The blonde introduced Yustafa properly. A lot had been heard about him, but it was always better to see him in person. A man should enjoy himself to the fullest, but remember that there were many ladies nearby who would want to dance with him. In fact, the Empress is right. The Duke is already popular, but he is also unmarried and incredibly handsome. The hero turned to his sister, tearing her out of her thoughts. He offered to dance with him, despite the fact that Ran was still bad at it. Previously, the lady often stepped on the boy's feet, but this time her steps seemed lighter. Yus had definitely become better at dancing. It seems that the talent appeared on its own, but the hero explained that he trained because he wanted to be the best. Because of his dancing abilities, the ladies at the ball began to show even greater interest in Yustaf. People always said that perhaps the Duke was ugly or looked bad, but all the rumors were dispelled. Everyone knew that Latium was also rapidly accumulating huge capital and had a wonderful future. At this rate, someone could take Yustafa away. The woman asked her brother to wait for his fate and not run after the first girl. It was awkward to talk about the topic, but the lady wanted to ask to wait for her love. The most important thing is feelings. The young man said that he would decide for himself what to do, and asked not to make a sad face. Otherwise, everyone would think that the brother and sister had quarreled. A familiar voice was heard. Ridget could not think that they would meet Yustaf in such a place. The Marquis did not come, and he did not care that the Duke was making his debut. Within 5 minutes, a multitude of aristocrats had gathered around. The lady decided to run away before it was too late, but she was stopped and asked where she was going. She needed to pick up a drink. When the lady finally received the glass, the prince approached her. The maiden was surprised, because she did not expect to meet him in such a place. The man didn't want to give his invitation to someone else. He started talking about the Green Arch and why the girl had dressed everyone in new uniforms. Everyone liked the idea, but of course it came at a high cost. The prince admitting that Latium had accumulated great wealth. The crown princess appeared. She didn't know that the prince and duchess were so close. She received an invitation to the garden, but even Olivia wasn't supposed to do that. The woman did not want to discuss a not very interesting topic and turned towards Yustaf. The young man is quite popular. The girl was also surprised by this. Most likely, Ran is glad that she has such a purebred brother. They wanted to escape from Olivia, just as a new melody began. The girl warned at the last moment that she was a bad dancer. After half an hour, the young man almost stopped feeling his legs. It was as if she was deliberately stepping on them with her boots 100 times a minute. However, the dance was over. The man suggested going for a walk. The lady's mood was spoiled because Olivia was with use. The Duchess was sorry that she could not change history. Apparently, the princess had already fallen in love with Laban. His Highness assumed that the lady was experiencing such emotions because she liked the young man, and she began to apologize. The woman shouldn't have given in to her feelings. All was not lost. It wasn't worth losing concentration. They found themselves in the farthest part of the garden, where the lady had never been before. At night, there was nothing to see because of the darkness. People in love are the only ones who could appreciate the place. It was a nighttime honeymoon. The brunette thought, for a girl with a beautiful appearance and popularity, she looks more like a spectator and seems not to believe that her time to shine will ever come. It was time to return. But before that, the girl was told something she didn't know. The invitation for use was personally issued by the crown prince. The young man had his own motives. He was probably doing this to stir up conflict in Latium. While the lady was thinking, a voice was heard. She did not want to be near this man, so she wanted to leave. Someone grabbed her by the hand, stopping her. The maiden threatened to scream, but she was allowed. The gentleman could say that she had seduced him, and even tell the details. It was decided to speak calmly. The lady asked to let her go and promised not to run away, but instead the body was pulled closer. The man suddenly flew to the side. Yus arrived in time and hit the prince, asking if his sister was okay. The girl looked down at the floor. Everything was fine, but she was a little scared, because she didn't expect such behavior. By this time, the young man had jumped up from the ground and was shouting loudly, asking if Yus wanted to be accused of treason. When the empress arrived, the blonde began to scream louder, asking to lock the brat in prison for his behavior. Yus noticed a bruise on his hand, so he challenged the prince to a duel. It would happen another day. But for now, they were getting ready to leave, because the girl was not feeling well. The empress allowed them to leave, because the duchess really looked bad. The mother ordered her son to shut up and cool his head. She was tired of his behavior. In the carriage, Laban asked once again if his sister was okay. The future emperor was to blame for everything. He had behaved terribly. Despite the fact that the lady assured everyone of her calmness, tears rolled down her cheeks on their own, and they hugged her to calm her down. The duel was still a problem, because if the prince was suddenly wounded, the palace might suddenly refuse to use the crystals of Latium. Blue-Eyed was calm. The product was being supplied not only to the territory of the empire, everything would be fine. The duchess's face seemed to ask if this was her brother's plan, but he shook his head. If the gentleman had had an idea, he would have acted differently and prevented what happened in the garden. Most likely, the prince will use a substitute in the duel. The young man had another idea. Perhaps the emperor would be used to show his greatness. He suggested trying to stir up the quarrel between the son and father. This would be the first step. Recently, Yustaf has become more gentle. At first, everything was much worse, and the duchess was incredibly happy about this. The brunette remembered seeing the lady leave with the second prince, and he was lucky that when he returned alone, he decided to go check. In any case, the whole society will find out about what happened tonight. It would be better to tell everything as it is, before someone distorts the truth. The sister was awakened. They had already arrived at the Green Arch. The knights must listen to what happened in the garden. The head maid was called to help the head change his clothes, do his hair, and touch up his makeup. Everyone was called into the office to be allowed to find out everything personally. This was the only way out of the situation. The servants were outraged. They could not believe that the prince allowed himself to do something so indecent. They were asked to calm down. It shouldn't all end with his apology. First of all, the duke wanted to see what would happen with the duel application. Tomorrow, there will be rumors spreading that will humiliate Latium. It's good that the servants learned about everything from the first persons. The image of a powerless and simple-minded person would suit the duchess, so the lady allowed rumors to spread. Yustaf didn't like the press, but it was a great gossip situation, and the Lindbog mistake wouldn't be repeated. In the New World, reading books and newspapers became the prerogative of high-ranking families, so that servants' conversations became as important as news. It would be nice to break the prince's support. The lady wanted to do this the next day. In the morning, Yus and the maiden arrived at the Imperial palace. She introduced him and thanked him for allowing them to enter. Thanks to the gentleman, everything was settled between the Marquise and the Duke, which made the girl even more devoted. The brunette said that his sister was very scared that day, but she only sobbed and said that everything was fine. Laban fell to his knees and began to ask for permission to duel. He wanted at all costs to return his sister's honor. In the end, everything ended well. The young man thanked him, but in the carriage, he noticed that the king was as stupid as his son. The Duchess knows very well how strong Yustafa's pride can be, and she knows how difficult it is to overcome pride. The man asked if the lady really wanted to be his sister, and if she really considered him her brother, even though they had no connection. Yustaf didn't scold the girl or interrogate her. He is with her for another reason. Everything is a little more complicated than it might seem. The young man could not tell the whole truth, but at one time he planned to reveal all his cards. The heroine should have been ready. According to research, Baron Gurn is a close friend of the prince. He is a known scoundrel. He can be bribed. The man won't be killed. Yus isn't that stupid. He appointed a new maid for the lady. She almost immediately visited the chief and introduced herself as Demodia Rusta. Count Balawan was the one who initially gave orders to the Green Shadow, so my brother must have brought Dia specifically. Large sums of money were spent on collecting information for Latium, but it was all justified. Having power is always good. The prince was indignant. His father ordered him to personally participate in the duel, and so they quarreled once again. The blonde promised himself that he would kill everyone so that they would incredibly strongly regret that they did something wrong. The emperor began to support Latium, and public interest was focused not on the Duchess, but on the duel. The girl tried to suggest something, but she was shut up, saying that both Ran and Olivia were too impudent. The princess couldn't even give birth to a child. The blonde was angry. Her husband was so stupid that he couldn't even be used as a puppet. It would be better if he died in a duel. In the morning, Rigid arrived at the estate. She still couldn't get over the news and what happened in the garden. The Marquis also arrived because he agreed to help. It was decided that only he would be able to do this, unlike everyone else. Kirkus smiled. He would only be glad if the duchy remained in his debt for the help provided. The girl enjoyed the dessert. In Latium, they created cream, which originally did not exist in the world. News spread that the prince had recently been receiving training from the captain of the Imperial Guard. He is preparing for a duel, that's why Ran asked for help. Kirkus could go out to fight against Yustaf. This will give him preparation. The young man gladly decided to accept the invitation. The girl thanked him. It was really important for them. Before engaging in real combat, the man wanted to see the Duke's abilities. The Marquis was actually looking forward to the invitation. Rigid turned to Ran again, asking if she was okay. The blonde was a little worried. She was afraid that this duel would be more brutal, but she hoped for the best. Latium had only thought about how to make the duchy richer, but now she was faced with something terrible that she was not prepared for. The woman supported her friend. Yus will be fine, because Karak is training him. He is good at this, and will help with everything needed. It was time to discuss something else. After what happened, the girl became even more suspicious that Ran liked Yustafa. The way the gentleman treats Romaija doesn't really look like a family relationship. He never even thought of the girl as a sister. At the moment, they remained in a mutually beneficial relationship. They had no other feelings. Ran seemed to always speak, excluding herself from any circumstances, as if she kept her distance. Yustaf made Kirkus feel vulnerable. He fought with all his might, as if he was putting his life on the line. Still, the brunette lost because of the sword technique at the throat. When asked, he said that he learned everything from Wild, the former head of the Knights of Latium. The man is good at such a young age. Katya would be interested to watch him in the future. Blue-Eyed kept thinking, because in 3 days there was supposed to be a duel. It could threaten his life force. Ran came into the room, noticing Yustafa in a robe. She immediately blushed. It was incredible how she copes with her duties, although she shows all her feelings. The Duke's monosyllabic answers were of no help at all. The girl saw that the documents had been sorted out for her and was grateful. The young man switched to a topic that Ran had not yet thought about. In winter, the river freezes. It would be better to build a dam in that place, next to the watermill. The girl managed with the help of her knowledge, but she obviously had shortcomings that they helped her to eliminate. It would be easier for Yustaf to be a duke when he grew up, but the danger of a duel still hung over him. Ran asked to be more careful, but it was Laban's decision. He promised that he would try his best. Dinner was to begin in 30 minutes, and the lady was going to warn the Marquise first. The head promised that she would come for her brother, but instead spent more than an hour getting ready because she needed to do her hair and makeup. The outfit was also chosen perfectly. The necklace matched Rand's eyes, and finally, she was about to go out. There was a knock on the door. Yustaf was standing there. He decided that since the girl had not come, he should go for her. The evening was filled with difficult thoughts. The only thing that helped to calm down was that soon the lady would hand over her powers to her brother. She would miss Ladium. During his studies, the young man always stayed at the academy even during holidays and constantly received letters from Ran. There was always the same question. One day the girl came to meet. Then the brunette did not even go down to the office to meet with relatives. Everyone else thought it was too much. But the young man didn't budge, thinking that after ignoring the lady, she would not come again. The woman did not live up to expectations, and after many times, Laban simply had no other choice. When the hero arrived in the hall, the girl was filled with joy, but immediately became sad when he left without even saying hello. This was the last memory of Ran before the death of their family. Then the story took a different turn. Before leaving, Ridget thanked her for the warm welcome and promised that she would invite Lucia to her place next time. The blonde quickly got drunk. Although she drank 2 drinks, she always did everything quickly, leaving no one a single chance. Whenever the blonde was told something like this, she always said that it was just her character, nothing more. People with a hasty nature usually give up quickly, but for some reason, Romy remained persistent. The girl admitted to Yustaf that he was right. She really doesn't think of him as her little brother. In fact, for her, Laban was the main character. Of course, she did not explain what exactly this meant. After the young gentleman escorted the Duchess to her chambers, he met Blaine in the corridor. The brunette wanted to talk about what they had discussed earlier, but in any case, that was not the most important thing. Yustaf was quite tired, but since the knight had been waiting for him for a long time, they still decided to talk and went inside. Blaine said everything at once. He didn't start from afar. The gentleman assigned the green shadow to the Duchess. Wilde shouldn't say anything out of place with his position. The guild doesn't concern him in any way, and especially not their affairs. Ross is going to be appointed head of personal security. Everyone knows about his abilities, and that he will be able to protect the lady. Earlier, the blue-eyed man asked to choose a good escort, and it seems that this person turned out to be it. Yustaf agreed to what was offered to him, but first suggested listening to Lazia's own opinion. 3 days later, in front of the prince's palace, Olivia brought a handkerchief with prayers for victory and wanted to tie it on her hand. The man threw the thing away and shouted that he would win thanks to his luck. The woman gathered all her willpower not to shout, but simply smile. The atmosphere between the married couple is no joke. The Duchess approached Yustaf and asked him to be more careful. When the duel began, the young man very soon realized that the sword was ringing, and this indicated that magic was concentrated in it. The enemy wants Yust to drop his weapon. The prince has always been a coward. But this is an even lower way. Most likely, the magic was cast in advance. The man knew that he just needed to buy at least a minute of time. In just a moment, the blue-eyed man made the blonde lose his sword. He would have to go to pick it up. The master had to put pressure on the magician to cast magic, a little more, and the enemy's weapon would fly apart. As the blue-eyed man expected, everything worked. But when he was happy, he got a knee blow to the face. The duel ended. Olivia wanted to clap, but instead she called the doctors. Ran rushed to the young man to hug him. The news of Yustaf's victory spread quickly, and along with it, everyone knew exactly how he had won. The master's sword was destroyed, and it was immediately clear that the prince had used forbidden magic. Soon the gentleman met the emperor's second son, who was an unusual guest for him. Laban was absolutely calm, and when he was told that the prince did not like criticism, he agreed. Only about himself. The young man had to ask why Lazia had come. Judging by what he had heard, the gentleman liked to be used. Smiling slightly, the duke suggested using others. He had come up with a very good plan. For now, both remained in silence, because they did not like noise, and there had to be time for thoughts too. The Imperial family has its own duties. Just like Ladium, there is no point in talking about it. The young man seemed to be hinting that the current heir had no right to become emperor. One could already see in advance what would happen to the empire. Laban offered the prince to become the leader. He gave an ambiguous answer, because those who have power have enemies. The hero did not want to hear a clear answer right away. He simply asked to be notified eventually. The brunette was left alone and began to think, the path to becoming an emperor is full of difficulties, given the fact that his father is still in power. They had a wise daughter-in-law. She had a beautiful appearance and a political mind. She was always felt to be the best choice for the ruler's wife. To be at least on the same level as the heir, I would have to marry an equally excellent person. The girl sat, thinking about what to answer in a letter for Count Illuminite, but she still managed to write something. It was raining heavily outside, but it promised to end soon. But if it got stronger, we would have to return to Latium later. Dia suggested going out into the garden. The drops hadn't become strong yet. Drinking tea outside would be a great idea. The girl agreed, but Ross appeared out of nowhere and thought the idea was frivolous. The heroine thought that the knight would not try to accompany the lady, but he agreed and carried her in his arms so as not to get his shoes dirty. The brunette snorted in displeasure. He couldn't let Yustaf know that he wasn't capable of even the most basic tasks. The blonde noticed that the guy was doing dangerous work, and it wasn't about him wanting to do it for the master. The heroine was glad to have the opportunity to drink tea in peace, and she also invited the maids to join her. The lady was tired of drinking tea alone all the time, and she would also like to listen to stories about what was happening inside the mansion. The maids liked the uniform. Everyone around treated them with great respect, understanding that they came from the Green Arch. Everyone was filled with aspiration, and the lady understood that it was not all in vain. Clothes were still very important for the spirit of the duchy. Yustaf's voice was heard. He came right in the rain, apparently attracted by the aroma of tea. The girl quickly held out her shawl, but her sister was completely dry, as if she had wings. Ross carried the lady to the gazebo, and for this the gentleman thanked him. The words made him embarrassed. Before her brother arrived, the young lady talked with the maids. She knew that she could talk to them another day. The woman quietly asked what had happened and where Yustaf had gone. The young man only wanted to talk about personal matters. They started talking, but the man answered in monosyllables. Ran asked him to communicate more simply, otherwise nothing would work out for them. In fact, they didn't have to talk about topics that would make them feel embarrassed. They weren't in that kind of relationship, and even that would end very soon. The maiden was thinking about what to talk about until she noticed a hole in the marble. The estate must have been built a long time ago. The man looked closely, wondering what the stone thought every time a drop of water fell on it. At first, he probably thought about how tired he was of it, but then he decided that he didn't care. The stone realized that there was a hole in it when the sound of the water became less unusual. Soon, the annoying sound of the collision was replaced by a melody filled with the ringing sound of a splash. That the raindrops did not fall with the intention of destruction seems very stupid and incomprehensible. By evening, the rain promised to become even heavier, and they had to stay in the Green Arch. Perhaps this was, on the contrary, for the best. The lady does not know whether she wants to return to Latium, because there are many things to do there, but she still asked her brother about his opinion. Soon a letter arrived from the Count. The flower was torn off, he found it, but this was not a reason for joy. As the man expected, he was unable to obtain tea leaves. The only seller wanted to see the buyer in person. The girl had no choice but to find out what the arena in the capital was connected to. Then the issue would be resolved in the royal castle. The next day, the lady informed the Illuminite that she would go and personally look at the goods she needed. Ran must have had a card up her sleeve, since she didn't know what the price would be. She could go herself. Suddenly, an idea came to mind. The girl told Dija that she was going to sneak out at night and asked her to stay nearby. The blonde hesitated. She didn't know that the Duchess already knew that she was from the Green Shadow. The maid agreed and promised to keep everything a secret. Yustaf had no need to know the details. Once the lady was done with everything, she probably wouldn't see Romier anymore, so it would be easier for her not to bother anyone. At some point, hope appeared in my soul that I would not have to leave the duchy. But these were just thoughts. At night, the girl met the Count. He did not think that the Duchess would come and even dress in hidden clothes. Before heading to the location, the Illuminite asked not to call him by name, and not to reveal his own either. My sister has already been taken away from security, but she was not in a very favorable environment, so she feels bad. The lady walked down an alley that was full of beggars. There were many children there, and it broke her heart. Finally, they reached the meeting place. Arca introduced himself and said that it was an honor for him to meet the buyer. The man realized from the head that there was a girl in front of him. It was strange to understand that she wanted to buy a gladiator. The lady believed the Count, but asked him to bring the item so that she could check everything again, just in case. Rumi entered the room. The heroine nodded and suggested moving on to the deal. She needed to finish this matter quickly. Arca wanted to meet in person precisely because of trust. He couldn't sell the goods just like that without clearly understanding to whom. In transactions, one must be extremely precise. The lady asked what kind of trust exists between the master and the slaves. The brunette snorted. He definitely wasn't going to develop a relationship with useless scum. After answering, the lady said that it was strange, because as far as she knew, Rumia's younger sister was with the master, and the place where she was recently attacked and burned to the ground. Arca screamed. He was sure that the girl would die. Because she needed medicine that only he had, he was cut down. All this time, the girl was receiving a drink of sleeping pills and wine. When Rumia heard all this, he reacted quickly, attacked the master, killed him, and then dealt with the assistants. When it was all over, while the lady was trying to come to her senses, the man approached her. It seemed that he was about to attack, but instead, the red-haired man fell to his knees and began to kiss the lady's feet. The girl was called the mistress. She really didn't like it, so she decided to ask not to do it in the future. Voices of people from the guild were heard. They urgently needed to get out. Rumi said that he knew a secret passage. Everyone went down the stairs. The exit was in the north direction. 2 more were located in the east and west. The girl was still upset. She told Ark everything so that he would understand that he could no longer order the slave around. It was known that even an angry man would not kill someone who was an aristocrat. The lady asked for help to remove the chains, because it was impossible for everyone to see him walking around, dragging his past behind him. Daya asked if the Duchess was okay, and she nodded. She shouldn't push herself too hard. There was no point. The girl asked the Illuminite for forgiveness. His identity would be at risk because of what happened. The young man said that everything was fine, because he was going to get rid of the Ark sooner or later. When they finally went, the chains were finally removed from the young man. His sister was on the top floor, but was still sleeping. The Count asked what the Duchess was going to do. She was going to release the slave and end the matter there. The gentleman nodded. Perhaps he should have kept quiet, but the guy's sister was sick. If things were left as they were, she would most likely die. The lady decided to deal with this later. Arca could have sent the pursuers, but he was a bad man in business, and many would probably be glad of his death. Most likely, those who were close to that man will start to sort things out among themselves first. They will not go looking for the killer. Finally, Rumia returned. He washed himself and was given new clothes, yet he was as handsome as on the pages of a book. The guy was taken to his sister, who was sleeping. Because she had no strength, he asked to come closer. After permission, the young man sat down on the bed. The lady invited the servants to leave, but at that moment, the girl opened her eyes. Almost immediately, Lily realized that it was her brother in front of her, and bursting into tears, she rushed to hug him. The little girl couldn't stop screaming. She missed him very much, because they hadn't seen each other for a decent amount of time. The young man closed his eyes and reciprocated. The Duchess, standing to the side, watched everything carefully. The girl couldn't help but notice how beautiful Lily was. Her appearance captivated everyone from afar. As far as I remembered, the girl was about 13 years old. Beauty was obviously passed down through the family. Suddenly, the girl stepped back and started coughing. The blonde immediately reacted and ordered to call a doctor. The lady rushed forward. The main thing was that the head was fixed during the attacks, and that the baby could not bite her tongue. After a few minutes, the child calmed down. She felt better, but her breathing remained heavy, and a doctor came running. The head also needed treatment. She was accidentally bitten on the finger. It was worth being careful. because the disease can be transmitted through open wounds. The girl turned to the former slave. She asked his name, although she understood that she knew it from the beginning. The man said he would be happy to be called whatever he wanted, and she smiled and called him Rumie. Initially, the lady wanted to allow the young man to go and live wherever he wanted, but upon learning that Lily was so ill, she decided to call an elf doctor she knew. Haresh hates the capital, so they will have to go to Latium. The girl had no choice. Rumie asked why they suddenly decided to grant him freedom. The heroine shrugged her shoulders. She had no motive. The girl was sorry to repeat the truth, but in fact, she had only one reason, and she had already named it. The man agreed to follow the Duchess, but he did not know whether his sister's body would withstand the long journey. The lady decided to sort everything out, but she didn't know how to explain everything to Yustaf, who once again seemed to be getting even more confused. The young man turned to the hostess. She shouted that he was his own master, and then Rumi fell to his knees to apologize and had to be calmed down. The girl was curious how it happened that the young man easily killed all those people, yet she shouldn't have asked that. She stroked the guy's head. He had to go through a lot, too. For now, the young man was sent to rest. The Duchess promised to pay the Count for all expenses. The girl finally got home, and when she wanted to get back into the room, she noticed Yustaf's figure in the darkness. The young man asked where his sister was. She was caught even from the back door, which no one used. Of course, the heroine was tired and didn't want to talk about anything. Instead of pressing, the guy picked the girl up in his arms. The blonde tried to say that she could get there herself, but no one listened to her. In the room, the hero asked what happened to his finger, but received no answer. The man still wanted to hear the story of what he and Diodia had been up to after they had left without warning. The young man wiped his hands after taking off his dirty shoes and again asked to tell him everything. The girl explained that she had learned about a friend of hers who had been sold to an illegal gladiatorial arena. After days of searching for information, the lady went to pick him up. The hero's sister was ill, and so the Duchess offered to help her. Yustafa shouldn't have cared how the maiden knew Rumie, because the main thing was that it wouldn't harm Latium. The girl promised not to die until her brother became the leader, but in the end she left alone, leaving the night in the castle. The green-eyed woman understood, worrying that if something went wrong, the next morning all the newspapers would be shouting that Lazia and Arca were accomplices. The man broke loose and screamed. The lady trembled, but swallowed her insult and explained that she knew for sure that she would not be caught. The heroine still felt cornered. She was still the leader and was not obliged to report on all her steps. If a guy is so worried, the lady will hand over this title on the day of his coming of age. It means nothing to her. The girl asked for forgiveness because the truth had been said. She was tired and did not want to talk because she could not think normally. As soon as the hero left, Ran began to cry. She pretended to be strong, but for the first time she saw a person die. She was very scared. After a while, Yus came to check if his sister had left. She had fallen asleep on the sofa. The tears had dried up in her eyes. The young man exhaled and carried her into the room. Rumie still didn't believe in reality. His initial entry into the Ark Arena was based on false promises. The illegal arena was terrible. You had to kill to survive, and even then the guy wasn't allowed to meet Lily. Only once was the girl shown from afar and told that she was getting better. It is surprising to realize that the Duchess does not need anything. Talk of the duchy even reached the arena, where they said that the head of the family was still a woman. Rumi immediately guessed that if that lady was really the leader, she would probably ask him to kill her younger brother. The murder of an aristocrat is a criminal offense, and as soon as the young man is caught, he will be immediately convicted. In the morning, it became clear that Ran had caught a cold. The maid explained that Yus had brought the Duchess into the room in the evening. It would have been nice for the lady to rest longer, but she couldn't. Because she had already slept for so long, she wanted to get up. The sister got ready and went into her brother's office. She understood that it was important to talk now. Virgo asked for forgiveness. It was wrong to devalue what is important to another person. The brunette explained that he wasn't really angry. He knew what the lady was doing. The maiden decided not to focus on the expression, so she simply said that they would take 2 more with them to Latium. The young man accidentally hit the lady on the forehead with his hand. He said that he himself did not understand why this happened. The girl coughed, but assured them that they would be able to go to the duchy tomorrow, because by that time she would feel better. Only after some time did she, the Duchess, understand that they were worried about her. All she did was talk about the place of the head. This was wrong. In the morning, everything was ready to leave. Lily, sitting in the carriage with Ran, could not help but notice her beauty. The girl was allowed to eat all the cookies that were brought. She was really cute. Her behavior was reminiscent of a small herbivore. Until the very end, Rumier did not think that the girl would turn out to be a duchess, and that he would meet Laban in person the very next day. Looking closely at the young man, the red-haired man mentally prepared himself for the fact that he would have to kill him. Some time after departure, there was a stop. The horses needed to rest, just like the people. The Duchess was helped out of the carriage, and Lily immediately rushed to her brother. Tea was brewed for the head, since she was still coughing. Blue Eyes asked if his sister had ordered his murder, because the look of that man, a former slave, seemed unusual. The lady began waving her hands to assure that she did not want to become the head forever. As long as the maiden remains the ruler, she can easily get rid of her brother. She still has time. The blonde grabbed Laban by the cheeks and asked him not to scare her like that. He said that he was worried because he had to watch his words. The Duke had to ask another question. It seemed to him that the maiden knew Rumier because they were former lovers, but she gave a negative answer. The position of the head will not be threatened in any case, but also everything that is in Latium belongs to the master. Rumi continued to watch the couple. They looked like they had a good relationship, but maybe it was just a show for the audience. Lily said that Ran was good to her and even gave her some cookies that the girl had brought to share. The redhead didn't understand why they were treated so well. After everything that happened, he developed trust issues. Ran came to visit the child. She was again called the mistress, so she asked to be called by just her name. The young man was really very sweet. He just said her name, and the girl already felt butterflies in her stomach. Initially, the woman thought of going for a walk, but Yus had plans, so taking advantage of the opportunity, she came to her new acquaintances. When the girl looks at them, at the maids or the knights, her gaze is always the same, as if she is looking at people. Perhaps she was just a good actress. The young man did not quite understand yet. The Duchess said that they would arrive at the place in 4 days. They would have to gather their strength. The lady also asked to think of what the hero would do, because he needed to somehow earn his living. The blonde could provide a standard amount to start life, but then he would have to find something to do. The young man fell to his knees and said that he would only do what he was told. The heroine exhaled. She understood Rumi's feelings. He had been deceived all his life, and then suddenly they gave him something, probably to deceive him again. The girl will have to prove everything, not only with words, but also with actions. The young man should not behave like that in front of his little sister. Finally, after 4 days, the carriages arrived in Latium. In August, the heavenly estate is not as hot as the capital's. The head was getting ready when suddenly someone knocked, and the assistant announced that guests had arrived. To begin with, they were taken to the reception room. Before leaving, the girl made a deal. But now there were other people in front of her. One was called Faison, and the other Jatura. The maiden suggested addressing them informally. It was easier for them that way. After the 3 had drunk the offered drinks, the discussion of the visit began. They brought armor. After trying it on, everything would become clear. If the dwarves eventually decide to hand over their mining technology, that would be wonderful. Futura said that they would not fulfill the lady's order. She found it strange. The one with whom she had made an agreement was glad to enter into a deal with a person for the first time in a long time. There is a strange echo in the mountains. Lately they are not like before. All the clans think that something will happen there. With all mining operations halted for now, the Duchess nodded and decided to put off thinking about what was about to happen for later. To begin with, it was decided to deal with the armor. The knights were asked to sort out the boxes, each one belonging to a different person. Initially, the leader asked to make the armor 100% from mithril, but since this is almost impossible, it was decided to simply add this ore in small quantities. Yus was also in high spirits. He knew that the knights were probably in the process of trying on their clothes right now. In the future, it is unlikely that it will be possible to receive supplies from the dwarves. The girl began to talk about the echo and suddenly screamed. She realized the truth. It will be about the star sand of Black Mountain, Nadium. Soon the echo will disappear, and the dwarves will begin to work as before. After the work is resumed, mineral water will gush out from the deep depths. The spirit inside will wake up and become angry. The water will swallow the mine and the underground city, and all the inhabitants of Black Mountain will be destroyed. That sand would be easier to process, but it would be stronger. The lady was glad that she remembered everything, but she did not quite understand what to do. The green-eyed girl did not understand how to explain everything properly. She was afraid that they would not understand her. Maybe they were not talking about the echo that she knew. The girl asked to give her time to get her thoughts in order. The hero nodded and promised to ask for tea, because the cough had not gone away. Rumier and Lily will not stay in the castle. The girl plans to find them a place to live, but before that, she will have to contact Haresh. The maiden suddenly remembered something. She jumped up and asked to wait until she came back. 5 minutes later, the lady was standing with flowers and some kind of box. She congratulated me on my birthday. Laban opened the package and took out a sword from there. The hero said that he liked everything and kissed the Duchess on the cheek. Immediately, his face flushed. He was too close to his lips for an innocent kiss, and a strange feeling lurked inside. In fact, the man could not have imagined that anyone would congratulate him. A lot of time had passed since he was last congratulated. The lady thought that her brother's friends at the academy congratulated the young man on the holiday, but it seems that they did not do so. The heroine did not want to stay in the room any longer, so, once again glad that the man liked the gift, she ran out. The girl needed to pull herself together and start acting faster. She wanted to be as strong as the sage Ibria. Love and feelings make some situations unpredictable. The heart can be weak. The lady entered Rumi's room to say that she had knocked with the elf, but she did not know how long the journey would take. It was difficult to compare the one the girl read about in the novel with reality. He was calm, although in the novel he was always hot-tempered. The blonde gently stroked the young man's head, and he kissed her palm. When she asked him not to do that again, the hero asked what was required of him. What the beauty really wanted was for the hero to become happy. He deserves it. Yustaf, Rumier, and Sheena, they all had to be happy. The Duchess wished this for all the people around her. The head went to work. She was quite tired. When she was offered to sleep in bed, she was immersed in her thoughts. The lady did not know what to do regarding Rumier, so she decided to go and consult with Yustaf. Of course, Ross followed the lady. He looked like a dog showing off his new look after shedding his coat. He definitely liked his new uniform. Until recently, the hero grumbled that he did not want to protect the chief, but after everything, he changed his mind. When the lady came into the office, she did not immediately find her brother. He was on the balcony and came out to ask what had happened. The girl asked about the Blue Flame Squad. It seems that anyone can enter there, regardless of status, only if their abilities are good. The heroine couldn't put two words together to explain that they should take Rumier. He never directly spoke about his desire. The brunette suddenly came very close and made the girl even more embarrassed. She didn't understand what had happened. Just as quickly moving away, the Duke noticed that his sister had a fever and that they should call a doctor. Objections were heard. The blue-eyed man picked up the girl in his arms and was about to carry her away because he did not want to talk to someone who was unable to determine his condition. Ross tried to intervene, but he was also cut off. He was a fool, because being nearby, he did not even suspect something was wrong. The man did not understand that the heroine did not like it. She asked to treat her with warmth, and this is exactly what the gentleman did. As they walked down the corridor, all the maids looked back, which made the lady even more embarrassed. The blonde was already regretting her words. There was no point in addressing her with warmth. These were nonsense that came out of the mouth of a drunk man. Still, the green-eyed girl calmed down. She didn't want to attract even more attention. This was the wrong step. Perhaps because of fatigue, the lady wanted to act like a child. She asked to play the piano for her, but received a promise to postpone it until next time. The conversation about the nightly detachment came up again. The lady did not ask to add Rumia by force, only by consent. When the lady was brought in, the maids began to worry, but they were right to know that she would be overtired. The headmistress acted as if she was dependent on her work. That was definitely wrong of her. Haresh's voice was heard. He, as usual, used the window instead of the usual door. It was easier for him that way. The elf grimaced when he saw the armor created by the dwarves. The relationship between the two races was so bad. Initially, the young man came to another patient, but decided to examine the lady. He immediately poked 2 fingers right under the rib cage. It became painful. Everything immediately became clear. The hero began to write that the mind needed to rest. There was too much stress concentrated in the body. The brunette wrote out a prescription that was a temporary protective measure. Now it was time to go to the real patient. Yustaf offered to go instead of his sister. She needed rest, and he himself could handle the simple task. The elf heard the question about the lady's condition again. Considering her workload, he was surprised that everything had not yet reached the final stage. Haresh found out about Yustafa. It's time for him to start asking for medicine so that the girl will quickly get out of action. Blue Eyes asked if they would give him the pills if he asked for them directly. The elf does not create killing agents. Lately, the man seemed to be concerned about Ran, and he apparently became a supporter of the Duchess because people had such an influence on him. As the two approached, Rume wanted to follow them. And suddenly, Haresh noticed that the man smelled bad. The young man said that it was impossible to cure what the girl had in the duchy, but everything was possible. He would try. Those standing behind didn't immediately understand. The red-haired man was scared at first, but decided to clarify everything. The baby will have to be taken to the elven village, which will most likely take a lot of time. The brunette said that he would prepare everything for dispatch, but then he was interrupted. The patient would go, but her brother could not go. A few meters away from the young man, he smelled of death and blood, as if he were an executioner. The smell seeped into his body even deeper. The girl's illness cannot be cured on human soil. Even bringing one person into the elf's territory is difficult, and taking a second person will be more difficult. The little girl ran to the red-haired man, and, hugging him, began to scream that she did not want to be alone anymore. The elf remained calm and stated the facts. With treatment on human soil, the lady would not live even a year. The brunette didn't want to press, but left a little time for reflection until about the next night. Yustaf couldn't smell anything at all, and he was confused by the fact that Rumia was so easy to read. Blue-Eyed asked the guy to come into his office so they could talk a little. It was necessary to understand where all this was leading. The brunette asked about what they had talked about with the Duchess, and they answered him with silence, since it was obviously a secret. The girl asked to give Rumie the opportunity to pass the exam to become a knight. It seems that the young man knew nothing, because he was surprised. He could even die during the exam, but he was determined. Soon the hero came to the lady to tell her about his decision. The guy's face expressed everything, and this frightened the lady. The red-haired man had been through a lot, but on top of all that, he even managed to pass the exam, which was surprising. The blonde heard that Lily would have to go to the elf village. Her brother was worried, but had to be grateful that she could be cured. In the end, the man persuaded the girl to go when she recovered. In any case, they would meet again. The lady took care of the expenses. In any case, another race does not exchange human currency. The man thanked her, and again called the girl mistress. This is what he himself wanted, and how he behaved. The heroine exhaled. She had given her consent after all, but only for 6 months. This period was acceptable. After all this, the girl went to visit Yustaf and entered just as he was playing the piano. The first thing the brother asked about was security, but they reassured him that the lady was safe in the estate, and Yus also walked alone. The woman looked at the piano and asked to play again. For some reason, almost immediately, there was a refusal. If something was wrong with Ross, the hero could assign another guard. Rumi was not suitable for this role. The Virgin made one promise, but it will have to be cancelled. It was impossible to give this position to someone so reckless. In fact, Rumie wanted to belong to the lady, and not in a strange way. He had been through a lot lately. While the heroine was thinking about how to say something else, someone just poured tea into her cup. Be that as it may, one cannot cross the line. Independence and protection of the head are separate issues. It was time to ask about what happened in the exam. Of course, Yustaf did not give in. The victory officially belonged to Rumie. The man was acting strangely. The lady asked about jealousy, and although she understood that it was not true, she wanted to joke about him. She froze when she heard a positive answer. She even had to ask again. Everything was so strange. The blue-eyed man was really jealous. so he asked the lady not to behave like that anymore. The girl decided to change the subject before she blushed even more. She decided to go to the mountains to check out some rumors. There were no other options left but to go and talk about everything personally with the dwarves. It would be suspicious for a blonde to talk about the ringing of the earth after only hearing about it once. The woman had a perfect plan, and she even knew that if everything didn't go as she wanted, she could always call upon a spirit. Yustaf asked to go together. His sister threw up her hands. The duchy cannot be left unattended. In fact, it would be better to go together. So the lady agreed that if the race met the young man, it would be easier for them to build a business in the future. Two people arrived at the estate and were greeted almost immediately by Yus, who, as usual, remained cold. One of the men introduced himself as Caruso, and the other as Daryl. They had previously been classmates. Yus's friends turned out to be simple. They talked calmly with the young man, as if they were very close. The maiden went to rest for now. She still did not believe that Fasen and Jatura allowed her to place the village. After the situation in the mountains was resolved, the lady was going to focus on courting Ladium. In the morning, Lily went to the elves. It was hard to watch the farewell and how she held back tears. It would have been good if the brother had gone with the girl, but they were not allowed to do so. The lady felt guilty that, being the mistress, she could not do anything. The lady went to Rumier, who at that time, as usual, was training on the battlefield, and the seventh opponent had already been called to him. The body must have been in bad condition already, and he wanted to refuse. But the man could not disobey the commander's order. The brunette was going to knock the redhead down with one blow, which would be easier for both of them. When Rumier gave it his all and almost won, Blaine stopped him and called a healer for one of the team. When the body was examined, it became clear that not everything was so bad. At that moment, the lady arrived. She was surprised by what was happening. Injuries during training were common, but Blaine couldn't help but notice that Rumi was out of control. When the captain gave him his freedom, the young man decided to go wash himself. There was another reason for his departure. He did not want to interfere. As soon as they were alone, the knight took advantage of the moment and asked about the fighter's past. Green-Eyed never told the story because she was afraid that it would cause prejudice. Taking a breath and gathering her strength, the lady nevertheless told that Rumi had previously been a slave in an illegal arena. The words resolved a lot. It became clear why the young man only used tactics that could kill the enemy. Knightly battles are different. There comes a time when you need to think about more than just killing. The girl asked to keep the truth a secret and asked not to worry. In the end, Rumier will become a great person. Standing underwater, the hero kept thinking. He really couldn't control himself. He had that very strong feeling and desire to kill. When the red-haired man met the owner, she assured him that everything was fine with the knight and that he would recover. Blaine said that it was normal to get hurt during training, and Fico didn't feel humiliated. The young man could not restrain himself and hugged the Duchess. It was a desperate movement, as if he were grabbing a rope. The lady was asked again what she wanted, but she repeated that she only wanted happiness and that she would not have to please anyone. The young man could do anything if he asked, but the lady still agreed to ask for something important later. The red-haired man was silent, but then asked if it would be necessary to kill Mr. Yustaf. He would be able to do it. The girl screamed and in shock began to clarify who said that. It turned out that Rumi had simply assumed, and his thoughts were wrong. I had to explain that the Lazia family had a temporary contract and was not going to fight for the position of head of Ron. There was a slight misunderstanding, but since the man understood everything, the lady suggested forgetting about it and going to rest. The headmaid looked at the two and asked how well they were doing. They were about to see. The gentleman said that from the day after tomorrow, he and the head would be temporarily absent. They had their own business. The young man left, leaving his friends alone with the woman, who said that she hoped that they would study their duties well and then carry them out. The knight did not understand why he was driving the carriage. It was obvious that the newcomer should have been riding in front and not on the horse at the side. The red-haired man turned and asked if he needed to drive the carriage. Apparently the man was tired, so they could switch. Thus began the journey to the kingdom of the dwarves. The delegation had a minimum of participants. It was impossible to go to the village with a nightly detachment. Having borrowed a carriage from the Golden Rose, they pretended to be merchants, which made it much easier to cross the border. Yustaf suggested that the lady switch to a horse. After all, she needed to learn and practice riding. It could help in the future. After a while, the blonde was finally able to climb onto the horse, but then she realized that she couldn't get off. Her legs and back were starting to hurt. The first thing the girl did upon arrival was fall on the bed. She couldn't get back up. But if she continues to ride, everything will improve in the future. There will be progress. Rumier came into the room. He thought that he could give the girl a massage so that she would relax. She shrugged her shoulders because she did not want this. The young man calmly explained that he would do a massage on her clothes, but if nothing was done, the girl would suffer even more the next day. For greater peace of mind, it was decided that the maid would remain in the room. There was no choice left, and the lady agreed. After a while, the woman passed out, as usually happens after a journey, and let the young man Dimidius go. The blonde thought, even though she was sent by the green shadow, she began to like Ran, so she didn't want anyone to get close to her out of evil intentions. The next day, the dwarf took me to the village to see everything. The place was truly mesmerizing with its beauty. The girl met with Raktu, the head of the Black Mountain, who complimented her hair, saying that he knew where to get gold of the same color. Usually, the race would brag at the first meeting, thus declaring themselves, it was in their blood, such a feature. The lady had no answer, but to calmly reply that she wanted to see the tactics of the dwarves, since she had no abilities. No matter how well everything is made, if there is no demand, everything would be wrong and out of place. The woman decided to get down to business. They definitely needed to discuss the mountain bell as soon as possible. That was precisely why they had come. When the lady had already sat down at the table, she suggested that Yustaf go and rest, but he refused, justifying this by saying that he also had the right to hear the conversation. The blonde started from afar. Something like a mineral water breakthrough could happen soon. Perhaps the spirit living in the mountain was about to awaken. Of course, the lady could only know for sure by entering the cave, but she also asked to take into account that she was the mistress of the ice wall. The green-eyed one didn't need to rest. She needed to check everything quickly to figure out how to convince the dwarves to evacuate. Yus followed his sister and was right not to leave her alone, because an hour later they were met with failure. Raktu led the two inside. They had gone far enough and he wanted to go even further so he would know where to go. A bright sound was heard, which was similar to the roar of a whale, and a second later, the ring on the Duke's neck began to glow. Suddenly, there was an earthquake, and the floor suddenly disappeared. It seemed they were trapped in a mine. The young man said he was not injured, but he smelled blood. The girl carefully began to feel the young man's body to find a wound. She exhaled when she found nothing. When Yustaf tried to move, a heavy sigh was heard. It turned out that he had been hit after all, or more precisely, his back had been hit. Blue Eyes didn't pay attention to this, and instead of taking care of himself, in response, he looked at the lady's body. She was fine. It was dark around. The girl was going to go forward, carefully holding onto the wall, and lead Yustafa behind. He still turned out to be more resourceful and summoned a blue flame. After some time, another mine was found. Things were scattered there. It was surprising that at least something useful remained. The bag contained dried bread, some stone mining equipment, and alcohol in a flask. The girl disinfected the wound with the drink. All that was left was not to overexert herself. They didn't have any ointment anyway. The young man shouldn't have followed his sister, but he had a different opinion. He was calm, because he didn't leave Ran completely alone. The blonde promised not to die and repeated again that nothing would happen to her. They would get out. They walked on. Fortunately, Romija was used to the pain in her ankle, which she discovered completely by accident. Finally, they found themselves near the water. It seemed to be rising up. The mineral spring could explode at any moment, and then Ron and Yustaf would be the first to die. But he didn't seem to be worried. The blonde asked to hold hands and said the name Shal. When he asked who was calling him, she introduced herself as a reader. The girl came to ask for a favor. She wanted to get out and do something with the city so that they could survive. The woman was angry that they came to her only for profit, but quickly calmed down, because it was quite funny. Istalif also came with the lady. She smelled of the ice wall. Shial asked to tell what they had read about her. The story was told. The city was supposed to sink underwater, and then a crystal called nadium would appear. Green-Eyed wouldn't want a relationship where they would talk to each other only for the sake of benefit. Suddenly, the spirit laughed. She became interested in what was inside the stranger's head. She was behaving unusually. Suddenly, Yustaf's sharp voice was heard. This made her eyes open wide, and the girl was immediately hugged. They found themselves on the surface. The hero did not understand what happened, because after the lady said something, they were both pulled under the water. The girl explained that she met with Shayal. Because of her, the mineral water was supposed to explode. She said that the blue flame that Yus possesses does not allow them to go together. The young man noticed that when the heroine tried to get up, her leg hurt. Taking off her boot, he realized that there was indeed a huge bruise. Yus picked up the lady in his arms and carried her forward. Her ankle needed a little rest, because it really hurt. The girl began to fear that she would never be able to stand on her feet again, but she was assured that everything would be fine. After thinking about it, the woman asked why the brunette didn't like the brother-sister relationship. He said that it was simply unrealistic from the very beginning. Blue Eyes asked if Ran wanted to consider him her real younger brother. Perhaps it would be easier for her to get used to it. The young man calmly said that they had a relationship between a man and a woman. The sister laughed. It was all a little unusual. The blonde offered to become friends, but she was refused. She really didn't understand who they were to each other. Although the lady worked hard for Ladium, she would not be allowed to stay there, and would have to start a new life as a new person. A tear ran down her cheek. Be that as it may, the heroine spent a long time in the duchy. After coming to the new world, she became most attached to this place. The girl was carefully pressed closer to him, which made things even worse, and tears started rolling down at double speed. Even though Yus may belong to Sheena someday, the girl will only borrow him for a short time at the moment. After crying, everything cleared up in her head, and the lady asked for forgiveness. The hero only asked to tell her right away next time if something hurts. As they approached the city, the cries of the knight Ross were heard. He ran up and began to ask questions. As it turned out, Rumi also arrived with the man, and he calmly asked the same thing. There was blood on his fingers. It seemed something had happened. The red-haired man reported that a spirit had appeared. He said that he had sent the lady and her companion into the lake nearby. Finally, the carriage set off back. The girl almost immediately fell asleep and rested her head on it, while her companion thought about what had happened. Already in the village of Black Mountain, the woman conveyed everything that the spirit had told her, and said that, in general, she was fine. The leader breathed a sigh of relief. The lady's beloved had put in a lot of effort. When the collapse occurred, he began to dig down with his bare hands. Later, the doctor examined Ran's leg and said that it looked like the bone was damaged, and that she might have to limp for the rest of her life. But maybe everything would be okay. Shayal appeared. She offered to help. When the leader saw her, he greeted her, and she in response asked to call her by name, Nadium. The gentleman wanted to pay himself. The lady prevented the city from being flooded, especially since she was a guest. The woman easily healed the girl's leg, and then the guy's back and arms. She asked them not to dig in her direction anymore. The dwarves were too noisy. She liked the flowers, so the inhabitants gathered to throw them into the lake once a year. The lady also gave a small gift to Ran, too. Romaya froze, because she had Nadium in her hands. After that, the spirit said goodbye and evaporated. After all, it was quite an interesting conversation. Immediately, everyone around began to examine the stone. The lady is not someone who knows about different types of stones, so she wanted to leave Nadium in the city. After the negotiations, the girl went to bed. And the next morning, when she woke up, she found out that Yus was training with Rumie. The brunette soon realized that his opponent was showing his thirst for killing. Of course, it was interesting to fight with him, but it was also very annoying. Perhaps the best option would be to simply kill the man. The best option would be to destroy all the insects in advance. When the hero attacked more strongly, the red-haired man wanted to destroy him, but this desire quickly subsided when he remembered his mistress. The girl came to check how things were going. She wanted to make sure that the wounds were okay and didn't hurt anymore. The young man again addressed the lady as the hostess. The lady did not know how to explain to him. She felt guilty that she could not save him in time. Looking straight into Rumie's eyes, the Duchess said that he did not look like someone who would simply wait for his master like a dog. Yus appeared from behind and interrupted everything. But you can't ruin the authority. You should remember what the girl's status is. The dwarf came running when the lady went to talk to him. The red-haired man told the master that he would protect the one who saved him. It turned out that they didn't have the strength to control Nadium yet. They just needed a little more time. It was important for them. But the girl said that she was already thinking about going back. Perhaps the lady would come alone and would have stayed longer. But there was no one left in the duchy. The man nodded and promised to convey the news to the head. The detachment would return to Latium only in a day. Everyone agreed with this, although Rumia still believed that they could stay longer. The woman suggested that Yustaf return alone first, but he did not want to lose sight of his sister. Soon after they parted, the Duke returned to suggest that they look around the village to make more memories. Dia, standing behind, was invited to join, but she declined, saying that it was better for them to go alone. Ross couldn't either, because he was ultimately tasked with sending the documents to the head of the dwarves. Not understanding the hints, the lady asked to go and pick up Rumia, and so they walked through the city. It seems the lady got hold of a map of the area somewhere. The girl brought her friends to the forge to look at the swords, and the owner immediately met them, and he immediately recognized the one who had recently saved their village. The brunette quickly became interested in Yustaf's weapon, since it was made by elves, and he wanted to look at the scabbard and blade closer. When Yus handed over the thing, the owner seemed to go crazy and began asking a million questions. It all got to the point that he offered to exchange the sword for his. Laban refused. He stated that he would not exchange his gift for anything else, although he did not consider elves better than dwarves. The girl didn't know that people were so easily excited, but as soon as they heard who had given the thing, they immediately dispersed. It was time to leave. They met with the chief for dinner and discussed the fact that the Duchess would soon be leaving the village. The chief asked how old the girl was, and when he found out that she was 20, he laughed. Compared to the age of the dwarves, this was considered a completely childish age. It was decided to hold a celebration, before which the old man asked about the age, so that later he could bring a lot of barrels of alcohol. Now the girl was declared a friend of the dwarves. She could not help but rejoice at this, and she hoped that the friendship would last as long as possible. A necklace of stones and white jade was made for Miss, and a piece of jewelry was also made that was perfectly suited for the wrist. The girl saved the lives of the entire village. They wanted to repay her with at least something, and sincerely hoped that the maiden would accept them. After a while, the Duchess became drunk. For the dwarves, alcohol was not strong, but for humans, even one glass was considered too much. Yus wanted to take the lady to the room, but Rumeh came forward and also volunteered, and the Duchess decided to ask the red-haired man for help. When the guy carried the lady into the room, she noticed how he smiled. Why, before he always hid his emotions, although he could behave according to his desires. The lady laughed. She would never hate the young man, because she knows him well. He is an excellent person. No matter what difficulties may arise, and no matter what sadness may come, the hero will choose what he believes in and will not give up. A young man should not try to force himself to please his mistress. After all, she does not deserve such treatment. Domitia ran into the room. The man explained that everything was fine. The most important thing was that he did not intend to harm Milady. At night, the green-eyed one got up and went to get a drink, but realized that she couldn't lift the bucket because it was full of water. Yustaf appeared. He helped. Everything inside the girl was burning. In dwarven culture, you can't refuse drinks. She had to drink. Still, the result was not bad. They went through a lot, but it was still definitely worth it. Perhaps the blue-eyed man still wanted to stay in the village for a few days. The maiden did not agree. Home is always better. It turned out that the Duke was outside, because the reception had just ended, and he was going to get some fresh air and go to rest. Yustaf was a little drunk, having had a few drinks, but it was hard to tell from his stone face. The conversation turned to what the lady would like. She would like to remain in Latium even after she hands over her post as head. The man remained silent, and the heroine assumed that this meant a direct refusal, but she was stopped. The hero actually had a condition. He was going to tell everything after he officially became the ruler. The woman could not imagine what was going on, and in order not to think anymore, she decided to continue her vacation. Finally, the boys went to Latium. On the way home, Rumi had a sparring match with Ross, and he lost mercilessly. After this, the knight asked for new battles, but each time he lost, even this time, he wished to fight again. During the journey, Dia began to please the mistress even more. The distance became closer than with other servants. The girl was always nearby, and when she grumbled, even that was to Romia's liking. She didn't mind. Rumier's style of speech and actions also changed. He stopped following the Duchess's reactions and began to speak more honestly. The maids did not understand why the mistress worked immediately upon returning home. She needed a little time to rest. It would be difficult to take a break in the man's presence, but he only told the lady to pretend he was not there. Still, the red-haired man also found something to do. The girl asked him to make the report himself, without Ross's help, so that he would look better in Blaine's eyes. Perhaps the reason for the changes was something Rand said, but after the night, she didn't remember anything at all. The girl decided not to think about it anymore. She suggested that the maids look at the new jewelry from the dwarves. In addition to the gifts, the heroine received from Rabori a box with a new ID card. In 2 months, Yustaf was supposed to become an adult. There was no fear of leaving, but only for a moment the lady thought that she could fulfill the condition and stay in the estate. Preparations for winter in Latium were in full swing, and they discussed all the details and upcoming events with the Duke. Caruso said that the duchy had a lot of cash left and suggested borrowing it. The lady shrugged. She did not like the financial business. The woman did not know whether she agreed to what her brother was offering her. In the future, she would not be able to monitor the fulfillment of her desires. Yustafa's hard work was paying off after all. They should now live in peace, and the residents could be happier. The lady remembered about the infection. The problem is that the future has changed. Yus, from the original, was lazy with Lindbog's daughter. She died without having time to do anything. Then Lucia was going through dark times. Then Sheena came, and when she found the crystals, everything became much better. Yustafa's feelings also arose because the girl was his savior. Now everything has changed. The woman never thought about the future. She was afraid that she had accidentally changed what was supposed to happen in the world. The man pulled the girl out of her thoughts. She said that she herself did not notice how she accidentally started cutting the plate instead of meat. The blonde tried to calm down. Even if Sheena and Yustaf don't fall in love, this will be their road and story. When asked what she was thinking, the lady quickly laughed, explaining that she was thinking about relationships. Winter has arrived, usually a time for rest, since preparations were completed just before the start. The brunette reported about the winter hunt. The thing is that monsters are descending from the ice wall, and they need to be destroyed. This used to be done before the young lady arrived, but the father stopped this tradition. After that, in winter, from time to time, a mountain of monsters appears under the mountain. After returning from the winter hunt, there would be a coming-of-age celebration. This year it was necessary to gather all the knights and make everything as grand as possible. Perhaps the upcoming event was supposed to be the perfect opportunity to give a formal presentation of the young man's powers. The Duchess said it was a good idea, and with that, the brother felt he had been officially given permission. The green-eyed girl simply hoped for the best, but she was asked not to think about problems, because she already worries too often. The girl wasn't used to people killing so easily, and she didn't intend to get used to it. She just hoped to take it more calmly. Later, the heroine went to Rumia to ask if he would go hunting. He did not immediately understand. The red-haired man was not going to go anywhere without his mistress. He believed that he should always be near her. The man brought up the topic of the lady's departure from the duchy. It was she who raised Latium from its knees. The blood of the Duke does not flow in her, but the girl is listed as a relative. The lady moved closer and assured him that it would be fine, since she had filled her second pocket as well, and she didn't particularly want to lose her place as Duchess. Still, the hero did not understand what the point was. From the very beginning, the lady did not want to be the head, but only did what she worked. The girl suggested going to rest a bit, but the young man turned away. She probably had a lot of tasks again. Still, Rumier had a sweet side. The heroine laughed. They would still go for a walk. She would work at night. The first thing they did was go sledding, which turned out to be much more fun. The hostess acted like a little child. She ran in the other direction into the snow. They laughed and enjoyed the time together. When the lady came back to the castle and told what had happened, Yus only asked if she was okay. The blonde decided not to stay long. The hot water was already ready, and she was going to go and rest. Rumier was called into the office for a talk. It turned out that Blaine was worried that the knight did not understand his place on the hunt. At first, the gentleman thought that the chief had picked up a dog that was only out to kill, but it seemed that he had become too accustomed to the collar. The young man shrugged. Rand said that she liked him. Yust decided to give advice. He recommended to refrain from delusions. Rumier was not obliged to be present at the winter hunt. The man did not care. It was another person's choice. Still, after Rand's persuasion, the boy became a member. She hoped that he would take advantage of the opportunity and feel his belonging to the blue flame. Before Yust left, the lady handed him a lamp. It was created by the dwarves. And since the thing was expensive, the girl asked him to return it to her. After the knights left, the estate became noticeably empty. This year, the lady had even more work to do. She spent all her time sitting in her office. Rand wanted to prepare everything properly. It was the right thing to do, at least for her. The girl sincerely wished that the new year would remain unforgettable in the memory of everyone who would be present at the ball. One wonderful morning, Dia announced that the knights were finally due to arrive from hunting, and the lady could not wait. When the lady saw the first horse, and Yustaf on it, she rushed forward to welcome him back. New Year's Day arrived. The chief greeted everyone who had gathered, and knights and guests arrived one after another. The event, which began quickly, lasted all night from December 31st to January 1st. At exactly 12 midnight, the girl bowed her head and said, "Hail, Blue Flame." She was happy to hand over the rights to Yustaf. Immediately, everyone around began to praise the new leader. Rand smiled, because what was happening gave her pleasure. Coming closer to the lady, the young man asked if she would give him her first dance in the new year. The answer, of course, was positive. The brunette noticed that he didn't think that the rights to the head's place would change right there in the hall. But this was the best moment, because there were many familiar people around. The blonde herself did not fully believe what was happening. Obviously, this would be the last time she would hear people address her as you. While the heroine was trying to express her true feelings, Yustaf suddenly said that he was actually worried. Now that the lady no longer has anything to keep her in Latium, she can suddenly leave this place. She promised that she would listen to the condition. After half the evening was over, the lady could barely walk. She was constantly invited to dance, which made her very tired. The girl met Rumia. She herself was not good at dancing, but offered to lend him one dance, only after a drink that gave her strength. When they went out onto the balcony and got into position, Rand started laughing. She was very drunk. For now, they would dance as they wanted, and later they would assign a real teacher to him. An hour later, when the lady went down to rest, Yustaf came. It turned out that his sister was there with Rumi, but he went for food. The gentleman wanted to talk, but in such a state, he would most likely not be understood. The girl would be better off going to bed. The woman did not agree. She took Lazia to a secluded place and asked her to tell everything. It seemed that it would be about a proposal. She already understood this. The girl insisted to the last that the young man tell her everything, and he gave in. She would be excluded from the family records of the duchy. In a second, her mind sobered up. Rand should have understood that this is what they would tell her, but for some reason, she still felt offended. The lady was about to leave, but she was stopped. The story was not finished, because she had the right to take with her whatever she wanted. Everything that was achieved with the help of the lady's efforts and labor, she had the right to take with her. There was no problem with that. The lady screamed. She never wanted this, and now she didn't know how to explain her feelings. Tears flowed down her cheeks on their own. The lady did not believe that they really had not gotten closer, and that they were not giving her another chance. The young man tried to calm the Duchess down. For now, he was giving her the opportunity to go wherever she wanted. But if she didn't do so, she would have no choice. An offer followed. The lady could either leave or refuse. Whatever Romia's choice. Yustaf could not pretend that feelings did not exist. Previously, they were relatives only on paper. This is no longer the case, and the hero could not contain his feelings inside, so that the lady would not think that this was a dream. He gently kissed her hand, making her blush. When the young man left and gave her 2 days to think, the woman began to wonder where his feelings for her came from, and that was when she realized that there were all the prerequisites for this. Rumier came, and it seemed he heard everything. They didn't have time to talk before Dia appeared in the corridor. She saw tears in the lady's eyes and asked to go with her to the room. The Duchess did not understand what was happening to her. The future was unclear. The first New Year's Eve became destructive. The girl told Domitia about what had happened. She seemed to know everything. Only the lady did not suspect about the feelings. The blonde tried to understand what was wrong and why the lady continued to cry. But it was difficult. The lady herself did not understand herself, but she was promised that if she wanted to leave, Dia and Rumia would immediately help her. For some reason, my soul felt a little calmer. All this was thanks to the care of my loved ones. Initially, the Duchess did not even allow herself to think about a love relationship with the young man. She was a heroine who traumatized him since childhood. When the main character appeared, Romy understood that someone like her would be immediately forgotten and not remembered. The girl said that feelings could still change, considering that they were brother and sister, but the maid said that no one thought so. The assistant came up with a solution that the lady could use at the meeting of the heads of the family. The next morning, the preparations were completed. The maid suggested at all costs to simply remain silent and watch from the side. Yustaf met the lady and noticed that she was, as usual, beautiful. She immediately blushed. The brunette understood that he didn't have the right to put too much pressure on him yet, forcing him to make a choice while he needed to leave time. The girl was silent at the table, while the young man talked about what everyone already knew. The first thing the head wanted to do was to exclude Rand from the family. Elizabeth asked why this happened. The lady had been trying all this time. Baron Lance also spoke up in defense of the girl, but the gentleman said that expulsion was inevitable. The Duchess calmly explained that she had been given time to think about whether to leave or stay, and whether to take another title. After the negotiations were completed, Wilde and Lance approached the Duchess to apologize for what happened. They actually wanted the woman to stay in Latium, although it was also clear that she had her own thoughts on the matter. After that, the Illuminite approached. This time, Rand told the story with the proposal, and he reacted calmly, considering it a good development of events. It seemed that everyone in the hall intended to see the leader, because she saw Yustaf in the corridor. The woman decided to give an answer. She likes the hero, but not as a man, because initially she did not think about such a relationship. Still, the blonde wanted to stay. The proposed conditions were still in force, so she agreed. The Countess had the right to take the lands for herself, and she informed the servants that she would stay only on the condition that she moved to another estate. A small detachment was heading to the ceremony, the first event after the New Year's celebration. Yustaf said that he intended to grant the title with permission to enter the castle, so the lady would be able to stay in the Sky Manor. No one has ever climbed to the top of the mountain. The higher you go, the colder it gets. The frost penetrates to the very bones. When the two came to check the wall, it became clear almost immediately that the darkness was awakening, but it was too early in awakening. According to the original, Lindbog did not perform the ceremony so as not to confirm the existence of the blue flame. To understand what had changed, the woman asked her brother to look at all the records in the archives. It was decided to return to the castle quickly because the weather had worsened and become strange. Yus asked to be more careful on the horse. Because of the snowstorm, nothing could be seen. The girl fell from the animal and found herself completely alone. She could not find any of her companions. Rand heard the sound and was scared, but very soon she realized that it was Yustaf. He had arrived to save her. With the help of the blue flame, the young man saved his sister, and so they arrived at the estate, where they were met. The girl was sent into warm water almost immediately. She asked about the others, and it seems the others remained okay. Hearing that the blue flame was used, the lady jumped up to check on Yus, but was stopped. He was safe. There is a fee for using powers. The hero must have spent a lot of energy because he created a high pillar. Still, having gathered herself, albeit a little later, the lady went to visit the head. Yustaf said that he did not feel very bad. The chief had other things to do, and he wanted the beauty to rest a little first, so he was about to leave. Before leaving, the man gently kissed the woman on the cheek and promised that they would see each other later. It seems that all the knights returned safe and sound, but the horse from which the lady fell can no longer be found because she got scared and most likely ran away in the opposite direction. Rumier always wanted to be close to his mistress, yet she was constantly getting into trouble, although no one knew that a natural disaster would happen. However, the lady agreed to go only with the knight from now on, so that if anything happened, she would be safe. The girl brought Yustafa a tray of soup. Almost immediately, Ren noticed that she was being called sister again. It seemed that the reason was that it made her heart flutter even more. They decided to discuss what happened again. The lady would like to forget about what happened, but they got into trouble. The lady had never said she liked Lucia before, but now she almost died trying to escape the snowstorm. It would not have been possible to keep Ran with wealth and power, but she did not run away, but stayed close. The woman brought the young man out of his thoughts by saying that they should start investigating the ice wall. The hero agreed, but the Duchess was only embarrassed by the fact that she was again treated coldly, although they talked about love. When the lady asked, she was told that she was the most precious person, and these were the right words. If you think about it, the woman understood that there was noise on the border of the wall. It was time to remove the seal from Ibria. Rumia suggested that the lady take a short walk, just so that she could calmly think about everything. She needed time. After the New Year celebration, everyone was busy, so they hardly met. Now they could talk. The girl explained why she decided to stay in the kingdom. She was kept by more people than expected. While the lady was speaking, the young man remembered Yustaf's words. He asked him not to be mistaken about the lady and her attitude. The girl looked a lot like the one selling candy. She's actually quite pretty. Rumier asked if the beauty wanted to leave Ladium at least for a while. She laughed, because she didn't want to freeze because of the snowstorm. The girl looked at the book, although in fact, due to the order of the sheets, nothing was clear. It was quite difficult. Since the end of the storm, there had been only clear weather, but the lady did not have time to enjoy it, because she again spent all her time in the library. The blonde wasn't going to give up so easily. The girl was going to sort everything perfectly. It seems the lady has found 300-year-old records detailing conversations with the conquering emperor. Yustaf sat next to her and listened, but in the heroine's head, he was too attractive. It made her feel embarrassed. At the moment when the gentleman first confessed his feelings to the beauty, and when he began to show them, the lady did not know how to behave. The man had his own thoughts. From the moment he began to press a little more, he wanted to ask about everything in turn. In March, winter was still raging in Latium. A messenger arrived from the Imperial palace. He arrived with news. The blonde learned that His Majesty had left this world. She was surprised, because in the book he was still alive even when Sheena arrived. Olivia must have changed her plans. The woman convinced herself that she just needed to calm down. Since Luce became emperor, his wife became empress. Be that as it may, the new king was against the duchy. It was interesting to see how he would act. The young man would not be able to attend the coronation ceremony anyway. He was going to go to the capital later and asked Blaine to check on the Blue Flame Knight Squad. Now, since Yustaf became the head, the maiden had no right to interfere and contradict his words. They believed in the woman's strength. She would have to cope with all the difficulties in any case, even though they didn't have any hope. As soon as the knights left, Rand pounced on Yustaf, asking why he didn't take her with him, knowing that he needed trusted people. The man simply did not want the meeting between his sister and the king. Now that he has become the main one in the kingdom, he will try to take possession of what he could not get before. Rand became an ordinary countess, which only made the situation worse. She officially became the boy's weakness. In fact, the blue-eyed man was happy that he became the head for another reason. His sister would no longer have to deal with negativity. A week later, Yustaf packed up and left. They tried to persuade him to take Blaine with him, but the knights stayed to defend Latium if necessary. Fortunately, the countess was so busy that she did not have time even for ordinary worries. Life went on as usual. Romia's first duty was to maintain relations with the dwarves, and they visited the palace. The heroine was glad to see familiar faces, but she never expected to meet so many of their race. They were much more determined than it seemed at first, but only the words about future plans made them realize that not everything was so simple. While the dwarves were preparing to build temporary housing, Latium was obliged to provide them with food and some other amenities. It was planned to launch some ready-made products for sale, but some problems were bound to arise with them as well. After the war with Latium, the Marquis put a lot of pressure on the masters, so they broke the contract and left. All thanks to rumors that, in the duchy, they would be connected with the Golden Rose organization. It was decided to create not a new guild of magicians, but a guild for the production of magical items from ice crystals. Lydia was asked to head the organization, and she agreed. The Countess was happy for her, but Frances decided to stay in Latium. Time, however, flew by too quickly, April began. The wind no longer burned the face, and shoots began to grow among the remaining snow. Unfortunately, no letters came from Yustaf, and the girl even felt sorry that he didn't have instantaneous movement magic. There were spells in the world that were forbidden because of their creator. Magic should not contradict the rules of the physical. For some reason, no matter how busy the lady was, she constantly thought about Yustafa, as if she could not get him out of her head. The girl made a plan, and according to the plan, she went to check on the villagers. Thanks to the devices that were given to them, they all survived. They thanked the heroine very much for the kindness she had shown, and they were pleased to be listened to. The lady in a sense understood why kings always traveled hiding their identity. They did not want publicity. Mrs. Rand completed the plan with a check. She was not obliged to go on her own, but she still decided to do so. Blaine had previously heard from Yustaf that he had proposed to Ran, and she had refused. But now, being nearby, he saw her sincere feelings. The man decided not to pay attention to this. Because everyone has their own path, the conversation turned to what Lazia would do next. In different places, as it turned out, estates were built for the family, and at night they were going to rest in one of them. The Duke was bullied in the castle, but the methods were as pathetic as usual. Nothing new happened. Olivia's voice was heard, which distracted him from his work. The Emperor was busy. He had gone to meet the Baron's wife. The heroine offered to talk to her, so they went to drink tea. The woman took a long time to get to what she wanted to say. In simple words, Rand needed to convey it to the Emperor. The question remained open. Yustaf did not care whether he received recognition for Latium or not. The man did not want to stay at the table, so he bowed out, making Olivia angry.